Princess Estate of the Florins Empire strolled happily through a magnificent garden, captivated by its beauty. She marveled at its vastness and splendor, losing all track of time. Her maid, Lyena, asked if she was enjoying herself. Estate gratefully thanked Lyena for bringing her there. Lyena modestly replied that it was nothing and suggested they could ask Sir Ashton to accompany them next time. However, Estate became concerned, not wanting to cause trouble for Lyena or Sir Ashton on her account. Lyena reassured her, addressing her as Your Highness. Although she knew this wasn't actually the princess's garden, she insisted there was nothing to worry about. To herself, Lyena revealed that the garden was a special place, where lilies bloomed year-round thanks to the prince's magic, and that it belonged to the Princess of Light. She reasoned that occasional visits wouldn't cause any harm, as the garden was maintained by magic and wouldn't be worn down. Hearing this, Estate admired the power of magic and softly expressed her own wish to one day wield it. She said that if she had magic, she could prevent the plants outside the palace from withering and keep the palace clean. That way, Lyena wouldn't have to work so hard cleaning all by herself. Estate's kindness touched Lyena deeply, but inwardly, she felt these reasons weren't significant enough to yearn for magic. Nonetheless, she replied that if Estate had magic, she wouldn't need to secretly help with the maid's work. Estate simply said she didn't mind helping, but Lyena insisted she shouldn't, showing her concern for the princess. Lyena reflected on how different Estate was, kind enough to care about the comfort of a humble servant. She couldn't understand why such a gentle person would be labeled as darkness or disaster. Lyena recalled the ancient prophecy from the darkest moonlit night of the 158th year of the Empire and the rise of the Red Sun. It foretold the birth of two new stars in the Florins Empire, one of light and one of darkness. The star of light would bring prosperity and glory, while the star of darkness would eventually consume the light and lead the empire to ruin. According to the high priest prophecy, on the day of the dark moon, two princesses were born in the Florins Empire. One, born to a commoner mother, was deemed the Princess of Light due to her possessing the royal family's signature silver hair. In contrast, Princess Estate, of pure royal blood, was born with black hair, a color unseen before in the empire. Because of this unusual trait and the unfortunate timing of the Empress's death shortly after childbirth, Estate was labeled as darkness or disaster. As time passed, Estate and the Empress's palace gradually lost influence and respect, and she was seen as an ill omen. But none of these misfortunes were her fault. Lyena felt it was incredibly unfair to Estate. From the moment she first met Estate, she never believed the princess would bring ruin to the empire. In her heart, Estate was incredibly sweet and kind. Lyena's heart filled with anger, blaming the hateful prophecy, and the cold-hearted royal family for their cruel treatment of Estate. Seeing Lyena's angry expression, Estate became anxious, recognizing the look Lyena often wore when the Empress's palace funds were cut. Estate's stomach suddenly grumbled. Lyena immediately asked if she was hungry. Estate, embarrassed and shy, tried to brush it off, saying she was fine and wanted to explore the garden a little longer. But Lyena insisted that skipping a meal would make her sick. Estate pleaded, saying she rarely had the chance to leave the palace and wanted to stay a little longer. Just then, Ashton Belga, captain of the Imperial Guard's 5th Division, appeared and offered to accompany Estate on her walk. Lyena was surprised by his sudden appearance and listened as Ashton instructed her to fetch some food for the princess. Initially hesitant and confused, Lyena agreed when Ashton pointed out he was more familiar with the garden. Before leaving, Lyena told him to take good care of Her Highness. Ashton gently turned to Estate and asked if they should be off. Estate happily agreed, her face brightening with a smile as she took Ashton's hand and hummed a cheerful tune while walking alongside him. A wave of sympathy washed over Ashton as he silently noticed how rough her hands were, not at all what a princess's hands should be. He lamented the fact that such a young child was already doing his servant's work. It was heartbreaking. Estate then asked Ashton if he frequented the garden. Ashton replied that he had only been a few times while escorting members of the royal family, but he made an effort to memorize the garden's layout and eventually committed it to memory. Estate expressed her admiration. She complimented him, and Ashton modestly agreed, making her laugh. As they continued their walk, a voice suddenly called out to Ashton, asking him what he was doing there. Ashton stopped immediately, and Estate, recognizing the voice, became tense. It was none other than Mileage and Firenz. The crown prince of the Florens Empire gave a cold nod of acknowledgement to Ashton Belga's arrival. Seeing a state present, he questioned the situation. Ashton respectfully explained that the princess wished to see the gardens, and he was merely escorting her. Estate stood nervously, but respectfully. She curtsied elegantly, addressing him as Your Highness. Inwardly, Estate recalled her half-brother, Crown Prince Mileage and Firenz. She had seen him recently. In that painful memory, she had asked him if he was her brother, but he had coldly denied it. He insisted she address him as Crown Prince, stating that only his true sister could call him brother. This had deeply hurt Estate, who couldn't understand why she couldn't be considered his sister. Back in the present, Princess Lily Amaryllis greeted Estate warmly, saying she was honored to hear she enjoyed the gardens. She invited Estate to join her for tea. During their conversation, Lily curiously mentioned Estate's rare jet black hair, saying she had only heard of it before. Estate, feeling uncomfortable, simply replied that it was also her first time seeing Lily's hair. Estate observed Lily, noting her beautiful appearance, lily-white hair, peridot green eyes, and elegant demeanor. She thought to herself that Lily was truly the beloved Amaryllis, just as people said. Then, Lily mentioned that she had been warned to stay away from Estate. This made Estate feel as though everyone saw her as the family's darkness. Lily noticed the hairpin in Estate's hair and asked about its origin. Estate happily explained that it was a gift from her maid, Lyena. However, Lily insisted on having the hairpin, claiming it was old and worn. Estate was shocked and hesitant, unwilling to hand over the hairpin, but Lily, with a condescending smile, downplayed the significance and continued to urge her to lend it to her. Faced with Lily's persistence, Estate became nervous. Lily asked if she disliked the hairpin that much. Estate firmly stated she couldn't lend it out. Ashton, noticing Estate's cherishing of the hairpin, felt a pang of sympathy. He recalled Estate excitedly asking him about lilies of the valley, explaining that the flower symbolized happiness. No matter what, she said Lyena had given her the hairpin as a birthday gift and told her the flower's meaning. Ashton understood its significance and smiled, praising Lyena's wisdom. Back in the present, Estate firmly refused Lily. She said the hairpin was hers, and she couldn't lend it to anyone. Lily was shocked and furious. She angrily smashed the teapot. Lily's rage escalated, and she even tried to rip the hairpin from Estate's hair, making Estate wince in pain. Mileage and Firenz intervened just in time. He grabbed Lily's hand and ordered her to stop. Lily, shocked, pulled her hand away and began to fake cry, trying to gain Mileage's sympathy while painting Estate as the villain. Lily accused Mileage of making it seem like she was forcing Estate to hand over the hairpin, complaining about how cruel he was being. She glanced at Estate with resentment, revealing the control she usually held over Mileage. Ashton comforted Estate, asking if she was hurt, to which Estate replied she was fine. Estate tried to explain to Lily, but Lily angrily interrupted her, questioning her intentions and how others would perceive the situation. Mileage calmly told Lily to calm down, but Lily angrily declared she hated everyone and ran off. Mileage sighed and instructed Ashton to follow her, which Ashton immediately did. Mileage then calmly sipped his tea, leaving Estate alone, feeling embarrassed and dejected, thinking it best to return early. Mileage noticed Estate's new dress, commenting that it was different from the last time they met. Estate, surprised, confirmed it was a new dress and happily said she liked it very much. Mileage then asked if it was warm, and Estate affirmed that it was. Mileage commented that this dress looked much better than her old one and wondered why. As a princess, she had gone so long without a new dress, speculating that her maid hadn't managed the finances well. However, when Estate said Lyena had made the dress, Mileage was shocked and sternly asked if Lyena had really said that. He cautioned Estate to be careful in the future and warned her again not to call him brother. He warned that the next time something like the incident with Lily happened, he wouldn't intervene. Estate felt hurt and asked if she was also his sister, if she also deserved the same care as Lily. She began to wonder if her longing for love was truly wrong. Mileage coldly told Estate that if he had to choose between her and Lily, he would choose Lily without hesitation. This deeply saddened Estate, and she looked at him with tears in her eyes, feeling utterly wronged. Mileage told her not to look at him like that, asking if she wanted him to abandon Lily out of pity for her. He warned her not to misunderstand, saying it was pointless, and then turned to leave. Alone, Ashtarte heartbrokenly recalled past dreams, fantasizing about walking hand in hand with her father and brother, cherished by them. She had once liked Lily Amaryllis, but now she realized it was all a dream. As she got down from the chair to leave, she felt utterly hopeless. Her foot bumped against a book on the floor. Curious, she picked it up and discovered it was a magic book. She noted that not many people in the Empire used magic, but the princesses did, especially Mileage, who was known as a genius. The book was filled with unfamiliar script, and she realized that to use magic, one had to know many languages, something very few people could master. Ashtarte began to read the magic book, surprised to find she could understand its contents, especially something called extinction magic. Excited and nervous, she eagerly flipped through the pages, wanting to read more. She noticed Mileage's notes scattered throughout the book, marking the parts he had successfully deciphered, where he was confused and what needed further research. Ashtarte wondered if she could help him. She hoped that if she could prove herself useful, Mileage might finally treat her like family, care for her. Then she saw the title of a powerful spell, the spell to find destiny. On this sleepless night, Ashtarte, after reading the spell, suddenly found herself transported to an unfamiliar room. Confused and disoriented, she realized she might have been brought here by magic. As she tried to make sense of her surroundings, she heard the sound of chains and grew tense, sensing someone else was in the room. Just then, a mysterious young man approached, asking if she was an intruder. He said it was too late for guests, but offered her a rare opportunity. If she left now, he wouldn't kill her. Ashtarte fearfully wondered if the boy was a criminal. Ashtarte began reciting the spell from the magic book, hoping to transport herself back, but nothing happened. The boy looked at her quizzically, asking why the spell wasn't working and what kind of magic it was. Nervously, Ashtarte explained that according to the book, it was a spell to find destiny. The boy scoffed, teasing her and asking if this was a new pickup line. Ashtarte blushed, quickly denying it and insisting it was real magic, not anything like that. The boy casually replied, "That's a shame," revealing a playful side. He introduced himself as the mysterious young man, Abelion. Although he initially seemed cold and intimidating, Ashtarte gradually found him to be polite and quite humorous. She found herself flustered, surprised by how different he was from her first impression. Abelion noticed Ashtarte staring and asked if he had something on his face. Ashtarte, embarrassed, quickly denied it. He then stepped closer, telling her to stop staring and instead tell him her name, reminding her that she had mentioned destiny. Ashtarte pondered, thinking of the ancient goddess Ashtarte, the goddess of war and love, supposedly spoken of by Lyena Abelion. She referred to him as the curious boy with violet eyes she met in this strange place. Several days had passed since she arrived. Lyena had been letting her stay with him until she found a way home. Initially, Ashtarte noticed he wore shackles and thought he was a prisoner. But seeing him move freely and his generosity, like always providing plenty of food, she realized he couldn't possibly be just a criminal. Lyena reassured her again, saying not to worry about food and promising to give her more. The next day, an excited Ashtarte happily agreed, smiling and calling him Lion. Lyena observed Ashtarte, thinking that while she looked like a noble lady, there was something different about her, reminding himself not to judge by appearances. Meanwhile, Ashtarte grew curious about who prepared the delicious food she had been eating. Her memory flashed back to a few days prior, where Ashtarte hesitantly asked Lyena if she could really eat the food. She said she could survive on just water for a week, even joking that starving was her specialty. Lyena asked in surprise if she was proud of that. Back in the present, Ashtarte shyly asked Lyena if he lived here alone. Lyena replied that he wasn't entirely alone. When she asked if he lived with his family, Lyena recalled his painful past, muttering that he wasn't sure, trying to change the subject. Lyena asked Ashtarte if she had any family. She hesitated, thinking that she didn't really know, as she had never met her father. And when she thought of family, the first person who came to mind wasn't her brother Mileage, but her loyal maid, Lyena. Deep down, she hoped to see Lyena again. Ashtarte excitedly ran to Lyena, showing him a book and saying it contained a spell that could transport someone to the person they wanted to see. Lyena chuckled, saying she didn't need to run over and could have just read it where she was. But Ashtarte said she just really wanted to show it to him in person. Lyena told her to go ahead and read it, thinking to himself that this girl was truly mysterious. a girl named after an ancient goddess, with long raven hair and a breathtaking aptitude for magic, read over 500 spells in just a few days. As Ashtarte began to chant a spell, a strong gust of wind suddenly swept through the room. Suddenly, Lyena noticed a heavy bookshelf about to fall on her. He immediately rushed over and pulled her away just in the nick of time, his face filled with worry. Lyena anxiously asked if she was hurt, but a panicked Ashtarte, in turn, shook him, asking if he was all right. Lyena reassured her that he was fine and asked her to stop shaking him. Ashtarte, feeling guilty, quickly apologized. She continuously blamed herself, feeling she had been too careless. Lyena was suddenly struck by a memory and a pang of guilt, thinking to himself that if only he had been more careful back then. He then told Ashtarte not to apologize for things that weren't her fault and asked why she always blamed herself, adding that she didn't value herself enough. Hearing these words, a familiar feeling welled up in Ashtarte's heart, bringing back a memory from the past. Her maid, Lyena, had once scolded her with the same concerned tone. Lyena had urged her not to treat herself as someone expendable. Back then, Ashtarte had fought back tears and softly agreed with Lyena. Returning to the present, Ashtarte felt that Lyena's words echoed Lyena's. She hesitantly asked Lyena if he was worried about her. Lyena was slightly taken aback by the question. When she explained that being scolded like this made her feel like someone truly cared about her, Lyena softly admitted that Ashtarte reminded him of someone he once knew. Ashtarte froze in surprise, wondering if she resembled someone important from Lyena's past. Lyena told Ashtarte it was time to stop using magic. He reminded her that it was already her 50th attempt today, the limit they had agreed upon earlier. Hearing this, Ashtarte sighed in resignation, remembering their agreement. Memories from 3 days prior surfaced. Ashtarte, holding a book, trembled with shame as she apologized to Lyena, saying she didn't know how to get home and regretted opening the book. She also recalled her brother, Mileage, coldly telling her not to misunderstand, as everything was futile. Feeling helpless, she wondered how she could be useful to her brother in her current state. To cheer her up, Lyena clapped his hands encouragingly, urging her not to dwell on negative thoughts. He suggested she try other spells instead of fixating on the one she had brought with her. Ashtarte nervously admitted that she wasn't sure if she could understand all the spells, but she was willing to try. Lyena then summarized their findings. Ashtarte could still use magic. There was likely a spell that could send her home. She currently lacked magical power, which was crucial for spellcasting, and she could read all ancient languages. Ashtarte was surprised by this, unsure what it meant. Lyena explained that magic originated from 3 ancient languages: Roxur, Abelion, and Vilac. Mastering one made one a genius, 2 a hero, and all 3 was awe-inspiring, even dangerous. He realized that although Ashtarte was incredibly powerful, she was still naive and unaware of the fate and risks she carried. Lyena told Ashtarte that since it was her first time using magic, it was best to keep it a secret from others. Ashtarte was surprised and asked if she could at least tell her brother, Mileage, but Lyena explained that revealing her power would put her in danger, because others might be jealous or suspicious of her abilities. Although Ashtarte felt fine and wanted to try another spell, Lyena stopped her. He placed the spellbook on a high shelf, saying he would keep it safe for her. He insisted she needed to rest and recover her magical energy before continuing to cast spells. Ashtarte looked at the book, both frustrated and worried, thinking that if she could only use 50 spells a day, it would take a long time to get home. Wanting to retrieve the spellbook while Lyena wasn't looking, Ashtarte secretly brought a ladder and leaned it against the high bookshelf. She climbed up step by step, reaching for the book, whispering to herself that she was almost there. Just as she was about to grab it, her foot slipped and she fell from the ladder, screaming as she tumbled to the ground with a thud. Later, Lyena found her and gently tended to her wounds. As he bandaged her, he said it was fortunate she wasn't seriously injured. Ashtarte felt embarrassed, insisting she was fine and could take care of herself. But as Lyena tightened the bandage, she winced in pain. Lyena quickly apologized, thinking she was afraid of his hands or his touch. Ashtarte smiled softly and told him that although she had been scared at first, she wasn't anymore. She said that because Lyena was gentle, she no longer feared him. She was just startled by the bandage. Hearing this, Lyena smiled warmly and carefully finished bandaging her wound. He then gently stroked her head, expressing his unspoken concern. After Ashtarte's fall, Lyena curiously asked her if she had cried out the name Lyena. Ashton, shocked to have heard the name, nervously asked Lyon if he had truly heard it. Lyon confirmed that he had, and found it rather peculiar. Ashton then recalled a childhood memory. She remembered the day Lyena first arrived as a maid. Young Ashton, with a bright smile, greeted her enthusiastically, saying, "Hello, Lyena, please take care of me." Lyena, touched by her cuteness, responded gently. Ashton recalled her residence in the Empress's palace, gradually forgotten over time, as in the eyes of the court, she was not a valuable or powerful princess. Serving her brought neither glory nor benefit. Despite this, Lyena remained unwavering in her loyalty. In another memory, Ashton remembered a time when another maid questioned Lyena's diligence in scrubbing, pointing out that it would soon get dirty again, highlighting Lyena's dedication even when no one understood. Lyena continued her work, completely ignoring the other maid's comment. The maid, dissatisfied, pressed Lyena, asking if she had truly volunteered to work in the Empress's palace. After Lyena confirmed with a nod, the maid sarcastically asked if she had bumped her head, as everyone else had gone to serve Princess Lily Amaryllis. Only she and Kate were left, having missed their chance. Lyena calmly asked, "So what?" The maid then explained that Princess Ashton was destined to become a dark star, bringing disaster to Florence. This was a rumor circulating among the court servants. Lyena angrily threw her rag at the maid, startling her. Lyena demanded to know who was spreading these rumors about Princess Ashton, pointing out that even the king had never mentioned such a prophecy. She warned the maid, whose name was Miron, that their fates were insignificant and spreading such rumors would lead to their deaths for disrespecting the royal family. Lyena's tone was icy, her demeanor firm. The frightened maid ran away, shouting that Lyena would regret not listening to her. She added that they would all be leaving the palace within a year. Lyena dismissively replied that there was nothing wrong with Princess Ashton. Young Ashton, hidden from view, silently watched all of this, recalling that moment. She realized that this was probably the beginning of her bond with Lyena, the first time she had someone willing to stay by her side. Ashton felt both curious and delighted. With gratitude, Lyena became incredibly special. Ashton, overwhelmed with emotion, recalled how Lyena had stayed with her and raised her even after everyone else had left, and tears welled up in her eyes. Ashton expressed her deep gratitude and worry, hoping to return quickly so Lyena wouldn't worry about her any longer. Meanwhile, Lyon clenched his fists, his expression clearly showing anger. Afterward, Ashton collapsed. Lyon recalled Ashton's emotional outpouring about her cherished person, which made him care more than he expected. He didn't understand why he was so affected, considering they hadn't known each other for long. He began to wonder if Ashton would remember him with the same expression when she returned home. Lyon then addressed his captain, acknowledging that the captain had something to say. The captain asked how much longer he intended to keep Ashton there. Lyon responded with a hint of surprise, asking when the captain had become so concerned about their guest. He brushed off the conversation and instructed the captain to have the cook prepare Ashton's favorite sandwiches. As the captain was leaving, Lyon firmly stated, "I'm not the young master anymore." He glared coldly at the captain, emphasizing his point. Startled, the captain agreed to remember that. Lyon continued to ponder, wondering if the captain had already realized that the cherished person in his heart was Ashton. Meanwhile, Ashton was still asleep, murmuring Lyena's name, expressing her desire to see her more. The scene then shifted to the fire on the day of Estate's disappearance. The vampire Lyena hummed a tune as she brought Estate her meal, hoping she hadn't fainted. As Lyena moved about, she saw Sir Ashton following Princess Lily Amaryllis, urging her to stop running around. Lyena looked at Sir Ashton in surprise, realizing that even he couldn't stop the princess from having fun. Sir Ashton continued to plead with Princess Lily Amaryllis to be quiet. Lyena, filled with confusion and worry, wondered why Sir Ashton was with Princess Lily Amaryllis instead of Princess Estate. She was so shocked that she dropped the meal. She hurried after Sir Ashton, calling his name, but hesitated when she saw an unexpected person. Crown Prince Mileage was standing nearby. Princess Lily Amaryllis curtsied to Mileage. Mileage asked Lyena if she liked the dress he had given her. Lyena humbly replied that she was honored to receive a gift, but Mileage revealed that he had also given a dress to Princess Estate. Earlier, Ashton had excitedly told Mileage that Lyena had made her a dress. Now, Mileage questioned Lyena about why she hadn't told Ashton the truth, implying that Ashton had always believed Lyena made the dress. Lyena calmly explained that Mileage hadn't ordered her to tell Ashton the truth, so she let Ashton continue to believe it. Lyena, sensing the gravity of the situation, was intimidated by Mileage's status as one of the most esteemed individuals in the Empire and a magician. Though trembling with fear, she mustered the courage to ask Mileage if he wanted to know something. Called a coward, Mileage glared at her in shock and anger, demanding to know what she meant. Ashton watched silently from a distance, stunned to see Lyena with the crown prince. Mileage warned Lyena to watch her tongue from now on, implying her life could be forfeit for insulting him. Lyena, terrified at having angered the crown prince, contemplated the consequences, but she also recalled trying to protect the princess from people like Mileage, even refusing to teach Ashton a particular nickname. In a flashback, Ashton ran excitedly towards Mileage, calling him brother and asking for his help in getting Lyena a beautiful dress. She explained that Lyena was someone very dear to her. Although she didn't have much herself, she wanted to give Lyena a special gift. Mileage, surprised, agreed to Ashton's request as repayment for Ashton saving his life once. Ashton thanked him profusely and excitedly. Lyena, watching the scene of Ashton, Mileage, and herself together, felt a flicker of hope. She imagined the princess finally experiencing the warmth of family. However, Mileage sternly warned Ashton never to call him brother again. He demanded Ashton address him as crown prince, like everyone else. Only Princess Lily Amaryllis could call him brother. Lyena, her hopes dashed, felt a surge of disappointment and a sense of betrayal towards the royal family. Disgust filled her as she wondered what Princess Estate had done to deserve such treatment. Back in the present, Lyena told Mileage she hoped he would continue acting as he had before, though his coldness towards Ashton and 10 years of neglect had only brought disappointment. She gave a bitter, ironic laugh. Infuriated by Lyena's words, Mileage accused her of overstepping, pointing out he had already given her a chance to speak. The narrative then shifts to the past of the two Florence Empire princes. Mileage and Noah, despite their noble status, were kept from someone dear to them for 10 years due to a prophecy. The high priest Horam had warned the emperor to stay away from the empress's palace. Even though the prophecy was hard to believe, it led to the two princes being forbidden from seeing their half-sister, born to the Empress Regent Rebecca, who died shortly after birth. The prophecy warned that a dark star would devour the light, bringing ruin to the empire. Everyone believed the silver-haired Amaryllis was the light, a belief Mileage held until recently. While working, Mileage suddenly recalled Ashton calling him brother and thanking him with a bright smile. He paused, lost in thought. Just then, Noah, the second prince of the Florence Empire, appeared, noticing Mileage's foul mood. Mileage brushed it off and asked about Noah's mission. Noah reported that the person they were tracking was extremely cautious, noting that anyone capable of injuring Mileage was no ordinary individual. At that moment, a maid arrived with a message. As per Mileage's instructions, 10 dresses had been prepared for Lyena Juarez, the maid from the Empress's palace. Noah inquired curiously about the dresses, but Mileage remained silent. The maid asked if there were any further instructions. Mileage, about to tell her to deliver the dresses, suddenly hesitated and changed his mind. Noah noticed Mileage's unusual secrecy regarding the order. Mileage then instructed the maid to prepare dresses for Princess Estate as well. Noah was surprised and questioned the reason. Mileage simply stated he had his reasons and that this wouldn't happen again. Back in the present, Mileage addressed Lyena, who felt a surge of panic, believing her earlier outburst might result in her execution. However, Mileage declared he would overlook her offense this time. When Lyena asked why, Mileage explained that even in her tattered dress, Estate had once asked him to get Lyena a new one. He realized Lyena was important to Estate and thus made an exception, marking the only time he had shown mercy to someone who hadn't helped him. He warned her there wouldn't be a second time, and turned to leave. Ashton approached Lyena, admonishing her for her reckless behavior. Speaking to the crown prince that way, it was a miracle she was still alive. He urged her, if she truly cared for Princess's state, not to do anything like that again. Lyena was startled. She suddenly grabbed Ashton's collar, furiously demanding to know why he wasn't with the princess. Visibly irritated, Ashton replied that he had been busy with other matters, carrying out orders. He reassured her that the princess had just been with him. If she didn't believe him, she could check the gazebo. The scene shifted to the palace gardens, where Lyena was leading a state out of the house. Ashton, seeing the lilies of the valley blooming around the gazebo, broke into a joyful smile. Lyena said he thought she would like the flowers. Ashtarte, deeply moved by the sight before her, thought how beautiful everything was. She also felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had seen this garden before. It reminded her of the lily garden at the palace. However, her moment of peace was interrupted by a painful memory. She recalled how Princess Lily Amaryllis had once tried to forcibly take her hairpin and had been cruel to her. Ashton suddenly realized her hairpin was missing and became very worried, because it was the one she always wore, the one Lyena had given her. She panicked, wondering where she could have lost it. Seeing Ashton's anxiety, Lyena suggested they go to the gazebo, saying he had prepared her favorite raspberry sandwiches. Ashton, momentarily distracted by the mention of sandwiches, asked in surprise who had made them. She enjoyed the sandwiches, but then turned to Lyena with a serious question. She asked him why he was being so kind to her. She said she had never been treated so kindly and didn't know how to respond. Lyena calmly reminded her that he had already said she reminded him of someone. He added that his kindness was for personal reasons, but for now, she only needed to accept it and say thank you. Ashton noticed the shackles on Lyena's hands and became concerned. She wondered why someone as kind as Lyena would wear shackles and whether they were uncomfortable. She reached out to touch them, asking if they felt stuffy, and expressed her confusion, as she had initially thought Lyena was a criminal. But he could leave the house and have snacks with her. She offered to help him remove the shackles, thinking she might be able to undo them with magic. Lyena was amused, asking if she was really willing to do that for him. Ashton firmly stated that she was sure she could find a spell to remove them. However, Lyena smiled and gently held her hand, teasing her that she just wanted her spellbook back. He pointed out that she hadn't rested properly yet. Ashton, stunned by his teasing, let out a surprised groan. Lyena explained that using magic required an equivalent price, and ignoring this rule would harm the caster's body. He made it clear that he wouldn't return her spellbook. Ashton felt dejected, withdrawing her hand and over having made the suggestion. She pouted, realizing she had only said it because she cared about him. Lyena appreciated her concern, but insisted he had no intention of removing the shackles for the time being. He said some people would be very anxious if he took them off. Ashton was curious who these people were, perhaps his family, but wondered why they would be afraid of someone as kind as Lyena. She then asked if he intended to live like this forever. Lyena vaguely replied, perhaps. Ashton couldn't accept this and loudly told Lyena to stop. She couldn't bear the thought of him living in shackles forever, and excitedly told Lyena that he couldn't hide like this forever, lonely and isolated. No one would want to live like that. She shared her own experiences with loneliness, emphasizing that she understood the pain of being hidden away. Ashton recalled her previous life, when she had no name, wasn't a princess, but just a slave passed from one owner to another. The children of the Viscount's family who adopted her treated her like a toy, enjoying playing pranks on her, taking pleasure in her pain. She remembered gradually becoming numb, until one day, something was put in her food, and she endured excruciating pain alone, unable to call for help, and no one noticed or looked for her. Despite her suffering, no one came to save her, and she eventually died alone, with no one by her side. Before dying, Ashton desperately prayed that in her next life, she would meet a family who truly loved her. She longed to love and protect them with all her heart. Ashton realized that she was not only Princess Ashtarte Firenze, but also someone reincarnated with memories of her past life. Since birth, her only wish had been to find a family who cherished her. Then, she had a flashback in the gazebo. She recalled a moment of despair, asking, "Your Highness, am I not your sister too?" But Mileage had sternly refused, saying, you shouldn't misunderstand. It was all in vain. The painful memory lingered, leaving her feeling downcast. Lyon, noticing her discomfort, asked with concern if she was all right. Ashton snapped back to reality, realizing she had unintentionally cried out, and quickly reassured him that she was fine. Lyon, understanding her worries, granted her request, saying he wouldn't hide anymore. Ashton sighed in relief and nodded in agreement. Ashton asked Lyon if he liked lilies of the valley. Lyon replied that his family loved lilies of the valley. Ashton noticed that whenever Lyon talked about his family, his expression turned cold, a bitter smile playing on his lips. It made her think that perhaps, like her, he missed his family too. Meanwhile, Ashton realized with a heavy heart that the peace in the Imperial Palace wouldn't return anytime soon after the incident in the Lily Garden. The trouble reignited. Because of what Princess Lily Amaryllis had said to the Emperor, Lily told him that she had met her sister, Ashtarte, and tried to borrow her hairpin, but Ashtarte had refused. Lily clarified that she didn't think ill of Ashtarte, but felt it was a misunderstanding. She confessed her desire for a hairpin like Ashtarte's, and told her father, the Emperor, about this wish. In response, the Emperor dispatched people to search for the most exquisite hairpin in the entire empire. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread throughout the palace, claiming that Princess Ashtarte had begun to consume Princess Lily Amaryllis, and people whispered that the prophecy was indeed true. Ashton frowned, recalling whether Lyena had safely returned with Ashtarte that day. He noticed the commotion outside, yet felt a sense of peace in his own room, perhaps because the person who knocked on his door every day was gone. The thought of Lyena irritated Ashton. He remembered how she used to constantly complain about trivial matters in the palace, even earning the nickname Walking Disaster. He felt that life had been much quieter without her. Just as he was about to leave his room, Lyena burst in, panicked and crying. She told Ashton that Princess Ashtarte was missing and begged him for help. Shocked, Ashton pressed her for details. Lyena explained that she had gone to the gazebo in the Lily Garden, as he had suggested, but hadn't found Ashtarte. She had also searched the Empress's palace, but to no avail. Deeply worried, Ashton realized that Ashtarte had been missing since then. He blamed himself for not personally escorting her back. He remembered promising to help Ashtarte from the first time she arrived at the palace. The scene shifted to a younger Ashtarte being brought before Ashton by a furious Lyena. Lyena angrily scolded him, exclaiming that it was unforgivable to let an outsider slip into the Empress's palace while the guards were unprepared. The guards were visibly nervous. Ashtarte looked anxious, unnerved by the stares directed at her. The guards whispered amongst themselves, calling Ashtarte the Dark Star, and commenting on how her dark hair was unsettling. Ashton stepped forward and silenced them, saying, "Enough." He bowed respectfully to Ashtarte, formally addressing her as Princess Ashtarte, and inquired why she had come to such a humble place. Although he knew he had to be polite to a member of the royal family, he couldn't ignore the name people called her. Ashtarte, slightly flustered, explained that she had simply followed Lyena. Ashton politely apologized for interrupting the knight's training, but Lyena insisted it wasn't her fault, instead blaming the knights for their negligence. Ashton was clearly impatient with Lyena's attitude. Lyena told everyone that the intruder Ashtarte had seen was injured and couldn't have gone far. Ashton then asked Ashtarte if the person was wearing a cloak or had their face covered. Ashtarte shook her head, saying she had seen him clearly. He had silver hair and was very handsome. Ashton then realized that Ashtarte had inadvertently encountered Crown Prince Mileage. Just then, Mileage himself appeared, confidently asking Ashton if he was implying that he was the intruder. All the guards immediately bowed, respectfully greeting him. From that moment on, Ashtarte's life began to change. Mileage approached Ashtarte, apologizing for the incident that night, and asked if she had been the one to stop his bleeding. He also thanked her for covering him with a worn-out rug. He had originally intended to thank her through Ashton, but since they had met again, he extended his hand and asked what she wanted in return, promising to fulfill her wish. Ashtarte excitedly requested a beautiful dress. Mileage was surprised that she had saved the crown prince and only asked for such a simple reward. Mileage agreed, but insisted that one dress wasn't enough. He would give her several that fit her well. Ashton recalled that perhaps that dress was the beginning of everything. Ashtarte called out to Mileage, addressing him as brother. Mileage paused, slightly taken aback, as if this moment marked the start of a deeper bond between them. Mileage, surprised, asked Ashtarte what she had just said. Ashtarte leaned closer and whispered something in his ear. All the guards were stunned by this unexpected action. Ashton recalled that although he hadn't heard what Ashtarte whispered, he could sense the weight of those words. Those who met Princess Ashtarte were changed. This even included powerful figures like Crown Prince Mileage and Princess Lily Amaryllis. Ashtarte possessed a mysterious influence, even making the woman who feared no one, not even the Crown Prince, tremble before her. Now, with Lyena crying and distraught over Ashtarte's disappearance, Ashton tried to comfort her, gently embracing her and encouraging her to regain her usual composure. The normally stoic Lyena, overcome with emotion, gasped that she couldn't breathe, prompting Ashton to quickly release her. After a few coughs, she confirmed she was all right. Ashton instructed Lyena to return and prepare for Ashtarte's return. With tears in her eyes, Lyena replied that she would prepare Ashtarte's favorite sweet milk while she waited. Both flushed slightly during their exchange. Ashton politely excused himself, and Lyena said she would rely on him. The scene shifted to Prince Noah walking down a corridor, overhearing two maids whispering. They discussed Princess Lily Amaryllis's desire for a hairpin, and how it had to be the most exquisite one. One maid mentioned finding several highly skilled artisans, and was confident they would be the first to acquire the perfect hairpin. Their conversation was interrupted by a gasp as one of them noticed Prince Noah. Startled, the two maids quickly bowed to him, worried he had overheard their gossip. However, Prince Noah paid them no mind and walked away silently. The maids, still nervous, whispered amongst themselves, wondering if he was going to see Princess Lily Amaryllis. They further speculated whether he was concerned about a rumor that Princess Lily Amaryllis had recently seen Princess Ashtarte. And in the darkness began to consume the light. They said Amaryllis had tried to hit Ashtarte, accusing her of trying to take something from her, simply because Ashtarte wouldn't lend her a hairpin. Hearing this, Noah questioned the rumor internally, finding it hard to believe Ashtarte would do such a thing. In a flashback to that night, Prince Noah lay outdoors, gazing at the stars. He then noticed a little girl he had never seen before, Princess Ashtarte. At that moment, Lyena told the little princess to stay put while she fetched some food from the kitchen. Ashtarte pleaded to go with her, but Lyena gently refused and hurried off, leaving Ashtarte alone, feeling sad and abandoned. Ashtarte looked down at herself, muttering with self-loathing about how dirty her clothes and hands were. She felt dirty all over and believed everyone hated her because of it. In the flashback, Noah approached Ashtarte, who was sitting outside alone. He asked her why she was there, thinking of her as darkness. He asked for her name, and Ashtarte shyly replied that her name was Ashtarte and that she was waiting for her attendant. Noah was surprised she was alone. Seeing her forlorn appearance, he felt pity and offered her his cloak to keep warm while she waited. Ashtarte hesitated, saying the cloak was too extravagant for her. Noah gently told her to consider it a gesture of familial concern. He said he hoped to see her again. Deeply touched, Ashtarte clutched the cloak tightly, a happy smile gracing her lips. Back in the present, Noah recalled that moment, finding it strange that a princess would utter such humble words, deeming the cloak too extravagant. Those of noble blood shouldn't think so little of themselves. A woman instructed a young Mileage, telling him to become a perfect emperor, never showing mercy to anyone, always remaining ruthless. She disciplined him with a stick, reinforcing her harsh teachings. Mileage awoke from a nightmare, gasping in anguish as memories flooded back. He bitterly recalled his past, remembering his mother, Rosania Firenze, the first empress. She wasn't a loving mother, but one who forced his growth with a whip, instilling in him the belief that only cruelty made a perfect ruler. Her sudden death from illness shattered his normalcy. After her death, he briefly experienced freedom, but quickly became lost, detached from emotions and others. Initially, he showed no interest in the birth of his sisters, but at High Priest Horian's insistence, he finally decided to visit Princess Lily Amaryllis, a decision that became a turning point in his life. Mileage reflected on his perception of Ashtarte, admitting that while he didn't believe in prophecies, he hoped Ashtarte was the elite everyone spoke of. He remembered the anger that surged within him when Ashtarte called him brother in the darkness. Despite his efforts to distance himself from her, the emotions within him wouldn't dissipate, causing him great distress. As he wrestled with these conflicting feelings, a knock came at the door. Ashton entered, his expression anxious, informing Mileage that Princess Estate was missing. Mileage was shocked, questioning how such a thing could happen. After all, Estate had always stayed within the Empress's palace. How could she disappear? Ashton told Mileage he didn't have much information yet, but according to Estate's attendant, she went to the Lily Garden and hadn't returned. Mileage felt a surge of unease and pain, struggling with conflicting emotions. He didn't understand why he felt this way when he thought he hated Estate. Mileage then asked if Estate disappeared after that incident. Specifically, it was about the tea party with Princess Lily Amaryllis. Sir Ashton confirmed this with Mileage. Mileage tried to remain calm, reassuring Sir Ashton that finding Princess Estate wouldn't be difficult. Since she hadn't been missing long, they could use magic to track her. Mileage opened his desk drawer to retrieve his magic book, only to find it missing, much to his shock. He asked Sir Ashton if he had taken it. Sir Ashton denied it in surprise. Mileage then ordered him to keep the matter secret and search all of Florence to find Princess Estate. After Sir Ashton left, Mileage grew increasingly uneasy. He felt everything was falling apart, and the missing magic book only added to his frustration. He wondered where he could have put it, feeling like everything was collapsing. At this critical juncture, Estate was perusing the very same magic book, discovering a spell related to holy magic. She was captivated, realizing it could instantly transport her to someone who was thinking of her. This gave her an idea. Lyena complimented Estate on her hard work, and she blushed slightly, a little shy. She replied that she didn't want to be a burden. Lyena reassured her, saying he never considered her one. Estate was grateful for his kindness, recalling how he had lent her clothes, given her food, and brought her to safety. Lyena teased her as he fiddled with Estate's precious hairpin, saying with a smile that if he were feeling generous, he might return it. Estate excitedly announced that she had found a spell to help her return. Lyena was shocked, impressed she'd found a solution so quickly. He asked if the spell could really send her to someone who missed her. Estate nodded confidently. Lyena, still surprised, said he hadn't known such a spell existed in Abelion magic. He quickly changed the subject, mentioning that the holy language of Abelion was usually used for supplementary magic, like casting barriers, blessings, or healing. Lyena pondered the purpose of a spell that could transport someone to whoever missed them, especially if no one did. Meanwhile, Estate began chanting, calling out Lyena's name. As the spell took effect, a light began to emanate. Lyena realized then that there was indeed someone who would miss Estate. Memories of Lyena flooded Estate's mind. A bright light flashed, and Lyena began to worry if Estate would truly return. The spell opened a portal, and Estate, seeing Lyena, cried out her name excitedly and moved towards the portal, saying she was going to Lyena. However, a worried Lyena tried to stop her, warning that the magic could be dangerous. Clutching the magic book, Estate continued towards the portal, calling out to Lyena. Just as she was about to enter, Lyena grabbed her and pulled her back, whispering that he couldn't just let her go. Estate asked, shocked, what he was doing. As she struggled to free herself from his grasp, she heard a crackling sound. A growing unease filled her as she realized the spell might be failing. Despite Lyena's warnings that the spell was failing and dangerous, Estate refused to give up, convinced it would work this time. Breaking free from Lyena, she rushed towards the portal, chanting and struggling to keep it open, determined to see Lyena. The magical portal responded, and Estate felt a surge of triumph, believing she had finally succeeded, but suddenly, the portal snapped shut with a tearing sound. Estate cried out Lyena's name in panicked disbelief, her voice filled with terror. Had the spell truly failed? A sharp pain shot through her head, and the world around her began to darken. Anxiety and confusion overwhelmed her, plunging her into fear and uncertainty. Estate stumbled, finally losing consciousness. Lyena quickly caught her, deeply concerned for her safety. Estate softly murmured Lyena in her unconscious state. Lyena gently checked on her, asking if she was all right, but she remained unresponsive, her weight heavy in his arms. She mumbled that she thought she'd finally succeeded, but still felt she had to go back. Lyena, feeling responsible for the failure, leaned down and embraced her. He silently acknowledged that he had interfered, reflecting on the dangers of disrupting a magical spell and the backlash it could cause the caster. He admitted that even though he knew the spell was dangerous, he couldn't let her continue. Lyena gently lifted her, preparing to take her back, and whispered an apology, saying he wasn't ready for her to leave. Holding his state, he addressed Captain Kalo, asking if he could believe that he would never harm her. Seeing Lyena's sincerity, the captain apologized for his earlier suspicion, explaining he only came to investigate after sensing unusual magical fluctuations. Lyena questioned whether Captain Kalo had been eavesdropping. Captain Kalo responded carefully, expressing his concern about his state staying in this country, pointing out that she wasn't from there. He worried that he couldn't stay forever, hesitant to say more. Lyena, seemingly unconcerned, sarcastically asked Captain Kalo if he was worried about him or his state. He even mocked himself, wondering if he would lose control and cause trouble again. He referred to his past as the Butcher of Elfolman. Captain Kalo, flustered, tried to justify his concern, but was interrupted. Lyena then pondered his state's odd behavior, noting that although she arrived dressed as a noble, she preferred to stay in a corner, enduring hunger, and was overwhelmingly grateful for even the smallest kindness. He wondered if she had been mistreated or neglected due to some hidden power, beginning to see a reflection of his own past in her. This hinted at a deep resonance between them. The scene shifted to Lyena, melancholic and restless in the night. After falling asleep, she was startled awake by the sound of Ashtarte calling her name. She searched frantically, but found Ashtarte wasn't there. Disappointed and confused, Lyena realized it was just a dream. She sighed, wondering if Sir Ashton had any news of Ashtarte. Lyena was flooded with memories of Ashtarte, remembering how she always insisted on doing things alone, despite Lyena's worries. Lyena recalled gently stroking Ashtarte's hair, feeling proud of her. These memories brought tears to Lyena's eyes, and she began to blame herself, feeling she had left Ashtarte to bear everything alone. She pounded the table in frustration, heartbroken by Ashtarte's disappearance and her own failure to keep a promise to someone. Suddenly, a knock came at the door. Hope flared in Lyena, thinking it was Ashtarte's return. She rushed to open it. She thought Ashtarte had simply gotten lost. To her shock, it wasn't Ashtarte at the door, but Sir Ashton. Lyena anxiously asked if he had any news of the princess, but Sir Ashton hesitated. To her further surprise, Mileage appeared behind him, leaving Lyena speechless. Mileage stepped forward and told Lyena he had something to ask her about the princess. Ashtarte. Lyena grew tense, wondering why Prince Mileage was there, especially since the high priest had forbidden him from entering the empress's palace. Confused, she asked him why he had come, reminding him of the high priest's order. Mileage recalled a conversation with the high priest, who had warned him to stay away from the darkness of the empress's palace. However, Mileage dismissed this, questioning what difference it would make if he came a second time. He remembered his last entry into the palace wasn't intentional, yet triggered a series of unfortunate events. In his memory, High Priest Horium Vazit appeared before him. He explained with a casual smile that he needed no reason to see the prince, and lightheartedly called Mileage the Empire's youngest son. Mileage was perplexed by the High Priest's words. Clearly impatient, Mileage urged him to get to the point. The High Priest calmly replied, noting Mileage's apparent foul mood and hoping he would receive divine revelation. That day, the high priest warned of a rebellious individual approaching Princess Lily Amaryllis and urged Mileage to protect the Empire's light. Mileage was skeptical. He didn't believe in the so-called divine oracles, suspecting the high priest, whose power had grown significantly since receiving an oracle 10 years ago, had likely gathered the information himself, not from divine revelation. Mileage questioned the high priest's request, asking if he truly wanted him to shoulder such a burden. The high priest readily affirmed, praising Mileage's exceptional magical abilities and implying there was no one more suitable. While walking outside, Mileage pondered that there were indeed more powerful magic users in the Empire than himself, Noah, their younger sister. He believed if the high priest had approached Noah, she would have done everything to protect Lily. He also remembered the high priest delivering a message about the princess inviting him to a tea party. Though suspicious of the high priest's true intentions, Mileage knew Lily was like a daughter to the high priest and believed he wouldn't put her in danger. Despite his doubts, Mileage decided to comply with the High Priest's request for the time being. Suddenly, he sensed a strange, ominous presence. His intuition was quickly confirmed as the maid screamed about an intruder. Mileage drew his sword without hesitation and rushed to protect Lily. He intercepted the attack, successfully protecting her. The intruder let out a sinister laugh, recognizing Mileage. Mileage was surprised the intruder knew who he was. The intruder mocked his reaction and greeted him with an unsettling familiarity, suggesting this confrontation was no accident. Mileage grew increasingly irritated by the ominous aura emanating from the intruder, even contemplating killing him on the spot. The intruder arrogantly declared he was there to confirm something, praising Mileage's reputation as a Recap magic master. With a mocking bow, he announced his intention to demonstrate a newly learned spell to Mileage, addressing him as the Empire's powerful youngest son. Mileage quickly assessed the danger, realizing that casting powerful magic without protection could harm nearby Lily and the maids. Acknowledging the threat, he drew his sword and challenged the intruder, warning him not to disappoint. The intruder responded nonchalantly, stating that death would be an honor. Then, casting a spell, he shouted Ashtriok, triggering a tremendous roar. Mileage was stunned by the spell's power, fearing it was incredibly dangerous. The intruder's potent magic wreaked havoc on the surroundings. Walls cracked, objects shattered, and chaos erupted. Lily, terrified, began to cry, and the maids rushed to shield her from harm. Sensing the imminent threat, Mileage swiftly cast a protective magical barrier around Lily and the maids, who were awestruck by the sudden appearance of the powerful defensive magic. Meanwhile, the fierce battle between Mileage and the intruder continued. Mileage fought valiantly, but was eventually wounded. Blood dripped from his wound, and he silently cursed his carelessness. Suddenly, the intruder began coughing up blood, surprising Mileage and halting his movements. He wondered what was wrong with his opponent. The intruder muttered in frustration, saying the spell should have been flawless, questioning why it failed. Mileage realized the truth. This side effect only occurred when a spell was interrupted mid-cast, or the spell had been mistranslated. He was shocked that the intruder dared to cast such dangerous magic, knowing the extreme risks, indicating desperation or extreme recklessness. Realizing his spell had failed, the intruder declared he couldn't let his last spell end in failure. He decided to retreat for the time being. Unwilling to let him escape, Mileage immediately cast the spell Noyan. A magical serpent was summoned, coiling around the intruder. However, despite Mileage's efforts, the intruder broke free and escaped. Muttering curses under his breath in frustration and disappointment, Mileage turned to Lily. He apologized to Lily, explaining that their planned afternoon tea would have to be postponed. With newfound resolve, he immediately pursued the intruder. As he ran, Mileage recalled the battle. He had never seen the spells the intruder used. The language of the spells was ancient. Even he couldn't identify it. Mentally eliminating known magical languages like Recap and Abelion, only one possibility remained: Wellick. He knew he had to investigate this mysterious attacker further. If the intruder truly wielded such dangerous magic, Mileage worried he might not be able to protect Lily next time. Mileage abruptly came to, finding himself lying outside, disoriented. He wondered if he had fainted and looked around. He noticed a young girl holding his hand, asleep. Seeing her dark hair and an age similar to Lily's, he realized this must be Princess Estate's fiancée. However, her appearance puzzled him. Despite being a princess, her clothes were dirty, and he suspected she might have even tended to his wounds. He sighed, realizing he had ended up in the Empress's palace, the very place he had been warned to avoid. As he gently reached out to touch the sleeping girl, a thought flashed through his mind. She was the darkness everyone spoke of. But just then, his mother's words echoed in his mind. "You will be the perfect emperor. No pity, only endless mercy." Mileage hesitated to show Estate any affection. He doubted his own feelings, thinking he wasn't someone who cared for others. He convinced himself they wouldn't meet again, just like before. He turned and left, leaving her alone in the middle of the path, justifying his decision by thinking they would both continue their separate lives, just as they always had. At this moment, Mileage recalled thinking their encounter would end there, but fate brought them together again while searching for Sir Ashton. To repay Estate for her previous kindness, he explained his reason for returning. Lyena questioned him, asking if that was his only reason for coming to the Empress's palace. Mileage replied that it wasn't. He reminded her that she had once told him to stay away from the princess, and if he had a choice, he would have done so. But as he looked around, anger surged within him again. The palace was dilapidated and entirely unsuitable for a princess. He angrily demanded to see estates, room himself. Lyena led the way, with Mileage and Sir Ashton following behind. As they ascended the stairs, the creaking sounds were worrisome. Ashton asked if it was safe, and Lyena explained they had no funds for repairs. Despite her repeated requests, the palace never responded. Winters were cold, food was scarce, and they lived in hardship. Yet the princess still held onto hope, longing for the day she could reunite with her family. Lyena worried that one day, someone would shatter that innocent heart. When they reached the state's room, Mileage was shocked. The space was fit only for a servant, certainly not for royalty. He couldn't believe no one had noticed things had gotten this bad. He recalled the state telling him she had nothing, but he hadn't realized she meant she couldn't even afford a new dress. Now he understood that if it weren't for the dresses he'd given her, she'd still be wearing rags. In fact, the rug she'd used to cover him looked cleaner than the clothes she wore. He also remembered sarcastically thanking her for covering him with the tattered rug, and now regretted it. As he looked around her room, Mileage suddenly spotted Noah's robe in Estate's closet. He was startled and demanded to know from Lyena why it was there, and where she got it. Mileage confirmed the robe in Estate's closet was indeed Noah's. It was the one he always wore. He realized he hadn't seen Noah wearing it recently and wondered if he'd been secretly seeing Estate. The thought saddened Mileage, and tears welled up in his eyes. Lyena explained that she had told Estate to throw the robe away many times, but she refused. To Estate, it was the first gift she'd received from her family, and she treasured it. In a flashback, Lyena saw Estate holding the robe and asked her about it. Estate happily said it wasn't from the crown prince, but from someone else who said it was his duty as family. She found a robe clean and precious, even afraid to wear it lest she soil it. Lyena gently asked Estate if she still loved the emperor and princess, even though she'd never met them. Estate noticed Lyena's sadness and asked what was wrong. Lyena pleaded with her, asking if Estate truly couldn't hate her royal family. But Estate replied that she couldn't change her feelings. Lyena had taught her to love unconditionally, so she couldn't let go of those feelings, even if it meant getting hurt. Back in the present, Mileage asked Lyena what Estate had said. Lyena repeated Estate's words and confessed to lying to Estate. She hadn't told Estate that the dresses were for Mileage because she didn't want her to get her hopes up. She knew time couldn't be reversed, so she thought it would be better for Estate to forget. Mileage deeply reflected on his feelings for Estate. He realized his past actions, his anger and indifference, stemmed from emotions he couldn't understand at the time. He admitted that even though he found her endearing, he ignored her suffering. Now he understood that he had already accepted her as his sister. Her worn clothes, her tears weren't unseen. He had simply chosen to look away. When she asked for a dress because she had no money, he was angry at those who didn't help her. When she called him brother, he felt guilty for never being there for her. In the end, all he truly wanted was to see her smile. Mileage wept, filled with remorse as he remembered Estate. The scene shifted to Estate unconscious. Lion gently woke her, and she slowly opened her eyes, recognizing him. She realized she had fainted again from using magic. Lion held her hand, telling her she had been overworking herself lately and insisted she rest today. Estate hesitated, but when Lion promised to make her a raspberry sandwich, she immediately brightened. She agreed to rest. As Lion prepared to leave, Estate suddenly called out to him, shyly and tearfully asking if he could stay with her a little longer, even just for a minute, promising not to bother him. She felt embarrassed and apologized, saying she was being stubborn. Lion sat beside her, gently reassuring her that it was okay, and he would stay until she fell asleep. Then, he seriously asked her who made her think asking for company was hopelessly stubborn. Estate saw a glimpse of Lyena in Lion's actions, especially when he was angry out of concern. She remembered a time when Lion had been angry with her, saying she didn't value herself enough. Estate wondered if he was worried about her again now. Just like before, she reflected inwardly. It wasn't stubbornness, but but fear. She had never dared to ask anyone for emotional support, not even the person who truly loved her. In her thoughts, she also remembered Lyena's warm words, saying she was doing well and that she was proud of her. Lyen asked Ashtarte if she was afraid of being disliked. Ashtarte nodded, explaining that because her family didn't like her, she was afraid Lyen would leave her too. Lyen trembled slightly and whispered, "But it's you who will be leaving, Ashtarte." He comforted her, saying that staying here wasn't so bad and she could stay a little longer, though he admitted it wasn't fair to Lyena, who was waiting for her. Ashtarte blushed, reflecting on her own feelings. She realized that the one who kept her tossing and turning at night wasn't family like the Emperor or the Crown Prince, but Lyena. She understood that if she had another chance, she wanted to go back and fulfill her wish, the wish she prayed for until her last breath in her previous life. Ashtarte expressed her desire not to give up, her yearning to be loved for a long time, and asked, "Is that wrong, Lyen?" Lyen held her hand, assuring her it wasn't wrong, but reminded her that it was impossible for everyone to love her, and she didn't need to love everyone either. He then handed her the lost hairpin, saying that someone already loved her. Ashtarte asked in surprise if Lyen had found it. Lyen apologized, saying he hadn't intentionally kept it from her. Ashtarte, moved, hugged Lyen, thanking him tearfully for finding her hairpin. Lyen's feelings were complicated. He reflected that he had initially kept her out of pity, but now understood he couldn't keep her here any longer. He didn't want to be the source of someone else's pain, even though it saddened him. Lyen told Ashtarte she didn't need to try so hard to be loved. In his eyes, she was already worthy of love. He decided to let her go to those who truly loved her. A while later, Ashtarte fell asleep. Lyen muttered to himself, wondering if she was already asleep. He put his magic book back on the shelf, sighing that it would have been nice if they had met sooner. He marveled at how quickly Ashtarte learned magic, wondering if it was her talent or her strong will. Though he felt he was too late, he believed she still had a chance. Chuckling softly, he decided to gamble his fate on her, leaving the book for her, hoping she would find it when she woke up. When Ashtarte awoke, she felt a heavy fatigue throughout her body. Realizing she must have overexerted herself, just as Lyen had warned. She remembered that using incomplete or interrupted magic was particularly draining for the caster, and realized how deeply Lyen understood magic. Ashtarte recalled the moment Lyen stopped her. It felt like her magic had been severed, making her wonder if he had intentionally prevented her from returning. But she quickly dismissed the thought, chuckling to herself, knowing Lyen wouldn't do such a thing. After all, he had been kind to her even when she was an uninvited guest. She couldn't think of any reason why he would want to keep her here. Ashtarte looked around the room and noticed Lyen's magic book on the shelf. She exclaimed in surprise that it was his book, and she could finally reach it. Ashtarte tried to grab the book, but couldn't quite reach it. Sitting down on the floor, somewhat dejected, she recalled how she had been studying all sorts of magic, searching for a spell to take her home. She gathered her courage and decided to use magic to retrieve the book. The spell worked, and the book fell from the shelf. Ashtarte caught it just in time, relieved, thinking she had to be careful to keep it clean when she returned it, afraid Lyen might get angry. She reassured herself that she would apologize if she angered him, and wondered if she should talk to him first so as not to worry too much. Mileage yelled angrily at Sir Ashton, repeatedly demanding to know how many times he had to apologize. Despite Sir Ashton's continued assurances, Mileage remained dissatisfied, as their report showed no progress. Sir Ashton explained they had been investigating the Lily Garden, where the princess was last seen, and while they suspected magic was involved, they hadn't found any trace of it. Exhausted and furious, Mileage sighed deeply, pointing out that without any trace of magic, they were no closer to finding Ashtarte than they were yesterday. He angrily questioned the point of their efforts. He warned Sir Ashton that the longer it took to find Ashtarte, the more likely her disappearance would be discovered. If people knew he was looking for her, it would inevitably cause serious problems, as he was a thorn in the Florens Empire's side. Mileage angrily gave Sir Ashton his final orders to continue the search in secret and to pick up the pace. Just then, Noah hurried into Mileage's office. Mileage greeted him and offered him a seat. Noah asked if there was anything he could do to help. Mileage praised Noah for his quick thinking and assigned him a secret mission. Mileage revealed he needed Noah to find someone, and Noah assumed it involved dealing with a person. However, Mileage clarified that he wanted Noah to find Ashtarte Firenze, much to Noah's surprise. Mileage explained that Ashtarte had disappeared, and despite an extensive search throughout Florence, they hadn't found any trace of her. Mileage, who had previously kept his distance from Estate, now expressed his desire to keep her by his side, if she was willing. Noah pointed out that the high priest would certainly object, but Mileage acknowledged this, which was why he was asking for Noah's help. He reminded Noah that he had always obeyed his orders and hoped he would do so this time as well. Noah agreed to do his best. In a flashback, the Empress told a young Noah to obey his older brother's orders, to which Noah simply replied, "Yes, mother." Later, as Noah prepared to leave, Morrigan stopped him. Morrigan noticed Noah wasn't wearing the cloak he usually wore. Noah lied, saying it was dirty and he had thrown it away. Morrigan then asked if he had given the cloak to Estate, which stunned Noah. Morrigan curiously asked him why he would do such a thing. Noah replied that even if it was an order, he would keep the reason confidential. Later, Sir Ashton walked towards Lyena's room, and Lyena opened the door. She greeted him. Ashton asked if she had been waiting for him, which Lyena denied, saying she just happened to see him coming from the window. Ashton noticed her attempt to hide the truth, and also observed that the tea was perfectly brewed and the snacks meticulously prepared, clearly showing she had put in a lot of effort. He also noticed that Lyena looked more haggard than usual and wondered if she had been eating properly. He then invited her to. Lyena expressed her frustration to Ashton, saying that every visit gave her hope, only to be disappointed when Princess Estate wasn't found. Ashton comforted her, saying this time might be different. He revealed he had received orders from the Crown Prince, and had even requested Prince Noah's assistance. Lyena asked in surprise if he meant the second prince, which Ashton confirmed. He assured her that with both princes working together, they would surely find Estate. Lyena smiled at Ashton and asked if he understood the value of precious things. She explained that often, only after losing something does one realize its true worth, hinting at the Crown Prince's current realization. Ashton asked her what would change now that the Crown Prince understood this value. Lyena replied that it wasn't the world itself that changed, but the way one looked at it. She added that her own world had changed greatly, implying this realization could alter one's perspective. Ashton still didn't quite understand. He didn't grasp her meaning. Lyena stood up and admitted that no matter how much she explained, she couldn't truly express her thoughts. She implied some things were too difficult to put into words. Ashton watched Lyena speak calmly, and the more he listened, the more familiar her words sounded, especially recalling how she had spoken to the Crown Prince before, though she wasn't as bold now as she was when angered then. Lyena walked to the window and said if it were possible, she wouldn't have so many regrets. Then, turning to Ashton, she softly said it was too late for her now, but she hoped Ashton would find the person he cherished. Ashton was moved by her words, thinking that Lyena's words carried a sadness he hadn't noticed before. He wondered if he had misunderstood her all along, and when Lyena spoke of finding a precious person, Ashton reflected on his own feelings. Since losing the princess, he felt lost and detached, believing he could no longer find meaning in anything. He believed there was nothing left to yearn for, and that nothing would ever be precious to him again. Lyena looked wistfully out the window, imagining Princess Estate playing with butterflies. She chuckled softly, whispering the princess's name. Princess Estate, haha. Ashton watched her, feeling helpless, thinking to himself, such a fool. She should at least cry out loud. Lyena. Meanwhile, Estate attempted to return using magic, chanting Hornlium, but nothing happened. She slumped down in frustration, questioning why there was no response. Did I chant the spell wrong? She grew increasingly anxious, wondering if her magic was running out, recalling Lion's restriction of 50 spells a day. With her magic dwindling, she worried she had exhausted it all, especially after using it to knock down the book earlier. The scene shifts to Lion. He asks Kalo where the guest is, and Kalo informs him that the guest is waiting in the reception room. Lion replies, "They're so persistent." He then enters the room where a red-haired man is waiting. The man greets him, "Greetings, Your Excellency." Lion responds with a hint of impatience. "I believe I've already told you. You didn't have to come all this way, Your Highness." The red-haired man is revealed to be Joshua Nohaz, the prince of the Nohaz Empire. Joshua says dejectedly that if he didn't come, he wouldn't know when he'd be able to see Lion again. He hangs his head, and Lion pictures him as a little dog with its tail between its legs. At this thought, Lion can't help but chuckle. Joshua then asks if Lion is uncomfortable, and Lion replies that he's grown accustomed to the shackles His Majesty bestowed upon him. Joshua firmly states that even though 2 years have passed since that incident, he still intends to free Lyon. He promises that the Butcher of Elferman will clear Lyon's dishonorable title. Lyon clicks his tongue, mentioning he had another title before that one. Lyon recalls the nickname, the Jester of Elpha, given to Abelion Elpha, the heir of the Elpha family, one of the 3 great families of the Nohaz Empire. People used this title to curry favor with Duke Elferman. Lyon then ponders the truth behind this title. Abelion possessed a dangerous ability. His power caused an unfortunate accident. His younger brother, Ian, lost a leg when Abelion tried to demonstrate his hidden power. Abelion hadn't realized the danger of this ability, nor its potential threat to the Emperor. In a flashback, Lyon's father, Duke Elferman, made him promise never to use his power, no matter what. Though it was an accident, Abelion, Lyon's older brother, was crushed by guilt. He hid his power and himself. No one in the family blamed him, but their kindness only made him feel more isolated. Lyon reflects on his situation with fear and sorrow, even wishing his family would hate him. But in truth, he feared the day he would see resentment in their eyes. Born with a cursed power, he felt he could only hide himself from the world. A year passed with little change until the Emperor of Nohaz summoned him. In another conversation with his father, Duke Elferman warned Lyon again not to waver, no matter what the Emperor did, and never to use his power. Lyon nodded solemnly, and then entered the imperial palace with Duke Elferman. Observing the excessive gold decorations in the palace, the Duke sighed, finally understanding why people always complained about the current ruler. He couldn't help but ponder the fate of the future crown prince, the next emperor. Lyon replied that he hoped the crown prince would be a good emperor. When asked what constituted a good emperor, Lyon answered, someone just and fair, uninfluenced by status or personal feelings. The Duke agreed with his answer. Afterward, Duke Elferman and Lyon knelt before Albert Nohaz, the emperor of the Nohaz Empire, respectfully addressing him as the Golden Dragon of Nohaz. The emperor welcomed them warmly, bidding them rise and telling them there was no need for such formality. He thanked them for their swift response to his sudden summons. He expressed his appreciation for their prompt arrival. As Lyon looked at the emperor, he sensed something amiss, and his unease grew. The emperor approached, a sneer playing on his lips, saying he had summoned them after hearing something interesting. He locked eyes with Lyon, intensifying Lyon's tension. The emperor then mentioned that it was something Lyon should be aware of regarding the Jester of Elferman. At these words, a chill ran down Duke Elferman's spine, for the Elferman family had held immense power since ancient times. Even before the current emperor's ascension, their influence and the notoriety of the Jester of Elferman often made the emperor and the crown prince feel threatened and inferior. Therefore, the Elferman family had always been viewed as dangerous rivals and a thorn in the side of the royal family. Lyon struggled to suppress his fear, reminding himself not to waver, but as the pressure mounted, his body trembled slightly. The emperor stepped closer, directly addressing him as Lord Abelion Elpha. He asked if it was true that he could interpret Wyrak and use extinction magic. This sudden question shocked Lyon, filling him with anxiety and disbelief. He couldn't understand how the emperor knew such a dangerous secret, as he hadn't used that magic since the accident. Lyon's silence fueled the emperor's suspicion, who scoffed that if the rumors were false, he could have easily denied them. The emperor's tone grew sterner, implying that Lyon's hesitation was proof of his guilt. Lyon's thoughts raced, recalling how his father had desperately tried to conceal this power. He knew denial was pointless now, while admitting it could be seen as treason against the empire. Crown Prince William Nohaz of the Nohaz Empire, with a hint of mockery in his smile, stated that such rumors were highly unlikely to be true. After all, would the Elpha family really conceal such a powerful ability all this time? The emperor sarcastically added, would the esteemed Elpha family truly orchestrate a rebellion using the so-called Jester Duke? Duke Elferman, sensing the sudden tension, hastily denied the accusations, insisting his son was just an ordinary person. He silently pleaded with Lyon to remain steadfast, no matter what the emperor said or did. Suddenly, to everyone's horror, the emperor stabbed the duke in the leg with his sword. Lyon cried out in anguish, "Father!" Lyon furiously demanded to know what the emperor was doing. The emperor warned him not to act rashly, threatening to sever the duke's leg if Lyon made any sudden moves. He demanded Lyon demonstrate his power to save his father. Lyon desperately denied it, insisting his father was right. But the emperor remained unconvinced, signaling the guards to bring forth Lyon's terrified mother and brother as hostages. Seeing them, both Lyon and the duke were stunned. His brother and mother cried out their names in terror. Lyon, shocked, recognized his brother Ian, wondering why his entire family was involved. To increase the pressure, Crown Prince William cast a spell on the Duchess and Ian, chanting Haraniata. William remarked, "Perhaps Lyon needs more encouragement." His magic killed the Duchess and Ian. Lyon, devastated, wept openly as William sneered at him. Overwhelmed by grief, Lyon questioned why they would go to such lengths just to test whether he possessed deadly magic. The emperor then raised his sword, threatening to kill Lyon's father. He told Lyon this was his only chance to save his father. In the distance, a young Joshua witnessed the scene, trembling with fear. Consumed by rage and self-blame for his cursed power, Lyon wished he had never possessed it. Finally, he stood, activating his hidden magic, and cried out, "Austriac." A massive magic circle appeared above the emperor and William. Seeing this, the emperor was ecstatic, realizing that with such power, he could conquer not only Florence, but the entire continent. Enraged, Lyon attempted to kill the emperor with his powerful magic, but Duke Elferman, his father, stopped him. His father reminded him that this power was not meant for killing and to remember their promise. Lyon, his emotions turbulent, withdrew his magic. With his dying breath, the Duke urged Lyon to live and fulfill his dream of becoming a great emperor. He told Lyon not to blame himself and died in his son's arms. Lyon, heartbroken, cried out for his father. Guilt and loss overwhelmed him. It was revealed that this was all Emperor Albert's plan. To prevent the Elfa family from being branded as traitors, Lyon was framed for patricide and burdened with the infamous title of the Butcher of Elfa. He accepted this disgrace for survival and to fulfill his father's dying wish. Now, facing Joshua, Lyon revealed he had known all along. After all, he had been watching the whole time, yet he hadn't intervened. Now grown, Joshua sincerely expressed his desire to make amends, though he acknowledged the difficulty. But Lyon, still burdened by the pain of betrayal and loss, scoffed inwardly. He found it absurd to live according to the will of the corrupt emperor. He thought that it wasn't time to blindly follow that path. These thoughts were the very beliefs he had always held on to. Recalling the past, Lyon remembered a state firmly telling him to stop running from the world. With a hint of challenge and curiosity, Lyon asked Joshua what he considered a good emperor to be. Joshua sincerely replied that a good ruler should be impartial and selfless, unbound by status or personal relationships, capable of bringing peace and leading the nation towards justice. In his memory, the Duke once again urged Lyon to live and achieve his vision of a great emperor. How to rule Nohas. Back in the present, Lyon told Joshua he agreed with that ideal and no longer wanted to remain in seclusion. Joshua was surprised, but before he could say anything, a loud crash echoed. Joshua asked if there were other guests, but Lyon quickly denied it, suggesting something might have fallen. He sensed the magical aura weakening, wondering if his state had returned safely. After her encounter with a runaway maid, the maid had sold the information about Lyon's extinction magic to a masked man claiming to be an imperial mage, and this information eventually reached Albert. Lyon thought of the imperial mages with disgust and anger. Not long ago, Lyon had suddenly awakened. Sensing the magic, he noticed Estate's hairpin glowing, confused and worried. Estate trembled slightly. Hearing Lyon's voice, she fearfully asked who it was. Lyon, thinking of Estate, realized this uninvited guest wasn't an imperial mage, but a frightened girl. Though she was troublesome, he began to worry about her. Her way of life, her hiding, reminded him of his own past. Perhaps because of this, even in this nightmarish situation, he no longer felt alone. Estate's presence brought light and solace. He was certain she had returned now. While he didn't intend to be separated from her forever, if she couldn't stay, he would go to her. He believed if fate existed, they would meet again. Meanwhile, Estate opened a magical portal with a spell book. Stepping through, she thought excitedly that she had succeeded, figuring she must not have been focused enough before. She found herself in a dark room. Looking around, she realized this wasn't the Empress's palace. Though she had never been here, she hoped Lyena was nearby. The spell was supposed to take her to someone who missed her. Seeing someone sleeping, Estate called out, "Lyena, why are you sleeping here? She believed only Lyena would come looking for her. Suddenly, someone grabbed Astate's hand. It was Olwen Florens, the emperor of the Florens Empire. He demanded to know who she was. Astate noticed his green eyes, similar to the princes and princesses, a seemingly hereditary trait. Seeing her eyes, Olwen exclaimed in shock, "Rebecca. Is it really you, Rebecca?" Astate was confused, not understanding why he called her that. Olwen angrily accused Astate of abandoning him and returning to mock him. Astate was bewildered, not understanding what he was saying. She pulled her hand free, denying she was Rebecca. She said Rebecca was dead, and she wasn't her mother. She confessed that her birth mother, Rebecca, the second regent empress of the Florens Empire, had died, giving birth to her 10 years ago. She didn't know Olwen. Olwen was stunned, then asked if she was Astate. Astate was startled, realizing he knew her name. Olwen pressed closer, continuing to question her. Feeling threatened, Astate decided to retreat. She cast a spell. No helium. A cloud of smoke rose, temporarily obscuring Olwen's vision. Unable to see, Olwen drew his sword and swung, trying to find her. Frightened by the sword, Astate thought she had to escape. Noticing Astate trying to flee, Olwen called out to her. But Astate rushed towards the magical portal, thinking Lyena must be waiting in her room. Olwen threw his sword, yelling for her to wait, but Astate rushed through the portal, quickly arriving at Lyena's side. Awakened by a loud noise, Lyena was astonished to see Astate before her. She asked incredulously if it was really Astate. Astate approached her gently, calling her name and half-jokingly asking if Lyena would prefer this to be a dream. Overcome with emotion, Lyena cried and hugged Astate tightly. She expressed how desperately she had searched for Astate and how afraid she was that something terrible had happened. Seeing how thin and haggard Lyena had become, Astate told her not to cry and blamed herself. Lyena begged her not to leave again, saying she couldn't bear the loneliness. Astate, too, couldn't help but shed tears, assuring her she would never leave again. Lyena was the only person she had to return to, and she promised she would always come back to her. After their reunion, Lyena made Astate some sugared milk. Lyena asked if Astate had used magic to suddenly disappear from the garden. Astate nodded happily while drinking the sugared milk. She thought to herself how good it tasted, just like the sandwich at Lion's house. Lyena was surprised, saying that was impossible, as Astate had never even learned the ancient language, which usually took a lifetime to master. She explained that this was why the princes, who had studied it since childhood, were considered geniuses. Astate admitted she also found it hard to believe at first, but insisted it was true. She questioned why she would lie. Lyena pondered silently, realizing the Florens royal family might possess a special gift, allowing them to naturally understand the ancient language. The princes did, and now even Princess Astate had demonstrated this extraordinary ability. Deeply concerned for Astate's safety, Lyena made her promise solemnly. She held out her pinky finger, making Astate swear never to tell anyone about her ability, that the use of magic would remain a secret between them. Astate was taken aback by the request, suddenly remembering Lyon, who had also warned her never to reveal her magical powers. Thinking of this, Astate's thoughts drifted back to Lyon. Astate felt a deep sadness and regret for not being able to say goodbye properly. She wondered when she would see him again, her heart filled with a strong desire to thank him for everything. But the fear of not being able to return if she used magic again weighed heavily on her. She shook her head nervously, silently vowing never to use magic again. Seeing Astate shake her head, Lyena felt a little disappointed and asked if she didn't want to promise. Astate quickly startled, explaining that wasn't the case. She was just confused by the gesture Lyena was making. Lyena explained that it was called a pinky promise, where they hook their little fingers together. Astate curiously imitated her, hooking her pinky finger with Lyena's. "Promise," she said cheerfully, assuring her that she wouldn't tell anyone about her magic. Lyena playfully warned her that if she broke the promise, she wouldn't make any more sweet milk. At the thought of losing her sweet milk, Astate was immediately shocked and saddened. It was a big deal to her. Lyena then added with a smile that if Astate kept her promise, she would make sweet milk even more often. Relieved and excited, Astate happily agreed and swore to keep her promise. She thought to herself that she could never give up sweet milk. The scene changed to Miron walking resolutely, a man panting behind her, calling out to her. He was surprised to learn she was going to the Empress's palace. He questioned her, asking if she was really going after not having visited for 10 years. Miron replied that she had heard his state had returned and wanted to confirm it herself. She confessed that she felt a deep guilt towards the child, a guilt that was almost driving her mad. The man, her attendant, caller Bermudas, sighed and firmly advised her not to go. He was polite, but frankly told her that if she truly felt guilty, she should stay away. He insisted that 10 years was too late, and showing affection suddenly after so many years wouldn't magically fix everything. In fact, he felt that if he were a state, he would resent Miron. A state must have people around her now who were truly like family, closer than Miron had ever been. Miron was deeply shaken by his words. Caller bluntly stated that she had no right to approach Princess Estate, and doing so would only confuse her further. Miron stopped, asking him desperately how she could regain that right. Caller was momentarily stunned. Miron retorted excitedly that nothing Caller said would change anything, but if she did nothing, nothing would change either. Caller, realizing he might have gone too far, began to stammer, reminding her to be careful of the high priest. He thought to himself, if the high priest were to learn of this, it could become a serious matter. After all, the high priest was popular among the people. If the crown prince opposed him, it could cause chaos. The high priest believed that the light of miracles would bring prosperity, and darkness would bring destruction. Although Caller personally had no objection to a state, politically, it was dangerous. Just as the atmosphere grew tense, Prince Noah appeared, unexpectedly asking Caller if he should go too, shocking Caller, who wondered how much Noah had overheard. Caller asked Noah if he was really going too. Just then, Ashton also appeared, saying he was going as well. Caller realized with resignation that no one was listening to him. He reluctantly followed everyone, his mind full of questions. Meanwhile, Lyena noticed the state was still wearing the same clothes and worriedly reminded her that the weather was cold and she shouldn't catch a cold. Estate said she wanted to save the special dress Lyena had given her for a more meaningful occasion. Lyena became a little nervous, as those dresses were actually gifts from the crown prince. Lyena handed Estate a glass of sweet milk to warm her up. Estate celebrated happily, saying it was much better than the raspberry sandwiches. Lyena curiously asked about the sandwiches. Estate explained that someone named Lion had given her food and helped her return. Lyena silently thanked Lion for helping Estate, even though he knew her true identity. Estate then told Lyena that Lion had also explained the origin of the name Estate, which was the name of an ancient goddess. Estate asked who had given her that name. Lyena confirmed it was her mother, Regent Empress Rebecca. It was said that the name was received from a god in a dream. Estate was shocked to hear that her mother, Empress Rebecca, had dreamt of a god. She questioned how a god could appear in an ordinary person's dream unless that person was a priest or possessed divine power. Lyena nodded and explained that the Empress had been a candidate for high priest and also possessed the ability to interpret the ancient Abelion language. Estate, realizing for the first time her mother's divine background, was deeply moved. Lyena continued, saying that in one of Empress Rebecca's dreams, a god responded to her wish for a child, telling her that she would be granted a child with powerful divine power. The gods also named the unborn child Estate and told Rebecca to take good care of this child they loved. Lyena said that the next morning, when the Empress awoke from the dream, she spoke the name Estate for the first time. Listening to Lyena tell the story of her mother, Estate felt a mix of emotions. Although she had never met her mother, hearing the story in such a heartfelt way made Estate miss her terribly. She felt a deep connection to her mother, as if she had been there with her in that moment. But suddenly, Estate realized something was odd. This story took place before Lyena had even entered the palace. Curious, she asked Lyena how she could know this so clearly. Lyena was taken aback by the question and tried to change the subject. Just then, a knock came at the door, surprising both Estate and Lyena. When Lyena opened the door, she saw Sir Ashton and assumed he was there to visit the princess. However, it was Crown Prince Miron who entered. Miron asked about Princess Estate's whereabouts. Lyena panicked and tried to stop him, but it was too late. Noah and Caller followed Miron into the room. Noah was shocked by the dilapidated state of the Empress's palace, while Lyena grew increasingly annoyed, biting her lip to suppress her anger. She wondered why these high-ranking men were so boldly walking around a place they shouldn't be. Lyena reminded Miron that the Empress's palace was off-limits to members of the royal family. Miron paused, taken aback by the reminder, while Caller asked Lyena in surprise what she meant by last time. Realizing this might not have been Miron's first visit, Miron quickly interrupted Caller, changing the subject to ask where Estate was. At that moment, Estate was nervously watching them from the top of the stairs. Miron noticed her, surprised to see she wasn't wearing the dress he had given her. After everyone sat down, Miron apologized for the sudden visit, explaining that he had heard about her disappearance and wanted to know where she had been. Estate remained silent, uncomfortable with being the center of attention. She had never imagined the Crown Prince would come to see her, and now not only him, but Noah and the others were here as well. Yet, she felt numb inside. Noah told Estate that everyone had been searching for her since they heard she was missing. He asked her where she had been. Estate thought to herself that she had once waited and longed for her family to come looking for her. Now that they were here, she should be happy, but strangely, she felt nothing. Miron observed her silently, noticing a difference in her eyes. Estate remembered Lion's words, "Not everyone will love you, so you don't have to love everyone either." She understood that perhaps this was the reason for her indifference. Just then, Lyena called out to Estate. Estate turned, surprised to see blood trickling from the corner of Lyena's mouth. Estate worriedly asked if she was hurt, but Lyena calmly explained that her lip had just cracked, probably from holding back her emotions. Then, in a low voice, Lyena reminded Estate not to forget their promise, not to tell anyone. Estate replied in a whisper, confirming that the promise applied to the princes as well, and assured Lyena that she wouldn't say anything. Estate lied to Miron, saying she didn't remember what happened, that she just lost consciousness and time had passed when she woke up. Miron pressed her for more information, and Estate became nervous, worried he would suspect something. Noah, however, became agitated, finding her explanation illogical, and demanded to know how she could be so calm. He warned her that if it happened again, she might not wake up next time and could even die. Estate knew she was lying, so she wasn't afraid, but simply looked at him innocently. Noah sighed in exasperation. He stood up, deciding to leave, saying that since she was all right, he would go. Miron pondered Noah's reaction, surprised that he had expressed his emotions so openly. He wasn't usually one to wear his heart on his sleeve, but this time, his concern was genuine. Caller thought to himself that although the visit had been abrupt, he was relieved to confirm the princess's safety. He reminded Miron that now that they had confirmed the princess was fine, it was time to return to the palace, especially before the high priest discovered they had been there. He hoped escorting the crown prince back would go smoothly. Before leaving, Miron walked up to Estate and asked if she knew who he was. Estate replied that he was the crown prince. Miron then asked her what their relationship was. Estate hesitantly replied that they were family, related by blood. Miron nodded. He then asked how she should address him, as family. Estate froze, a painful memory surfacing. A time when she had called him brother, only to be coldly rejected and warned to behave herself. Ashton's heart pounded in his chest. He felt a surge of anxiety, bracing himself for a warning from Miron, like she had given him so many times before. He hesitated, then addressed her, Crown Princess. "You told me to call you that." Miron acknowledged him, a melancholic expression on her face. Ashton was confused. He expected her to be pleased, but her expression was anything but. Miron recalled Lyena's words, reminding herself that time could not be reversed. She clenched her fists and turned to leave. Caller, breathing a sigh of relief, eagerly followed as Miron strode away. As she walked away, the memory of Estate's detached gaze lingered. There was no emotion in her eyes. The words, "Crown Princess, you told me to call you that," echoed in her mind. A sharp pain pierced Miron's chest. She thought of Estate. Even though she had returned, the ache in her heart remained. Ashton, noticing Miron's discomfort, offered to call a physician, but she declined. No matter what he did, he thought, the pain of Estate's distant gaze wouldn't disappear. Her presence only intensified it. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman approached the grand temple of Asmodeus. It was a dark and sacred place, accessible to only a select few. Even in daylight, a heavy atmosphere clung to the temple grounds. The woman entered and reported to the high priest. She informed him that the princes had made their move. Specifically, they had entered the Empress's palace, a forbidden area. The high priest remained surprisingly calm, his face betraying no reaction, as if he had anticipated this. He asked the woman why she was so nervous. She stammered, clearly uneasy, but he coldly reassured her that there was nothing to fear. Confusion and anxiety were etched on her face. The high priest reminded the head housekeeper that their goal was to isolate his state, the Dark Star, and protect the kingdom of Florence. The head housekeeper agreed, firmly expressing her loyalty to the land of her birth and upbringing. However, she confessed that the prince's recent actions, particularly the crown prince's involvement, had made her anxious. A knowing smile played on the high priest's lips. He suggested her true fear was the crown prince discovering her secrets, specifically the large sums of money she had been funneling to the empress's palace. He directly addressed her identity and role as head housekeeper, pointing out that the ledgers held proof of her actions. Despite the head housekeeper's nervousness, the high priest reassured her that he would handle the situation and instructed her to return to the palace. Inwardly, she told herself to trust the high priest. Before she left, he casually inquired about Princess Amaryllis. The head housekeeper replied that the princess was as usual. The high priest instructed her to report any unusual behavior from the princess immediately. The head housekeeper reiterated her commitment to the peace of Florence. After the head housekeeper departed, the high priest grew agitated. He realized the situation was spiraling out of control. He gritted his teeth. Why? He wondered, had estate Florence, who had always lived a quiet life, suddenly been thrust into the spotlight. He thought of the upcoming Holy Rite, a crucial ceremony in the fight against the forces of Ashtaroth. He decided to elevate Princess Amaryllis' public image. He was convinced this would turn the tide, confidently declaring that no matter what happened, the darkness of the empire, Ashtaroth, would never overcome the light. A week later, the scene shifted to Emperor Alvin, who sternly reprimanded Miron for her reckless actions. Collar stood beside her, nervous and dejected, feeling that they were doomed. He had tried to suppress the rumors, but he couldn't stop the palace gossip, and now the emperor had caught them red-handed. Alvin questioned Miron's judgment and expressed his shock at her entering the empress's palace, a strictly forbidden area. Emperor Alvin demanded to know why Miron had changed her mind, reminding her that since the prophecy, no one was permitted to enter the empress's palace. Miron mentioned the prophecy, stating that the girl named Estate was the dark star destined to bring about Florence's destruction. Collar was stunned, his heart pounding with panic. Miron shouldn't be saying these things in front of the emperor. He recalled the high priest telling Emperor Alvin that darkness would swallow the light and destroy Florence. Alvin had been furious. He had accused the high priest of arrogance, sarcastically questioning whether his own child would destroy the empire. In his rage, Alvin had even destroyed half of Florence's temples. Only the high priest remained, and during the confrontation, he had worn a strange smile. He worried about the severe consequences Miron would face if she repeated the prophecy now, especially in front of the emperor, who had reacted so violently to it before. Miron told Emperor Alvin that he just wanted to see the girl, and after meeting her, he realized she was just an ordinary child, just as Collar had imagined. He worried that the emperor would be furious, blame him for not stopping the princes, and imprison him in the dungeon. Collar regretted trusting Miron and became extremely anxious. However, contrary to Miron and Collar's expectations, Alvin calmly said that the girl had beautiful golden eyes that would shine even in the darkness. His words shocked and confused them, as if the emperor had already met the princess. Alvin then sternly questioned Miron, asking if he truly believed the girl was just an ordinary person. He revealed that the night before Miron went to the empress's palace, a mysterious young woman had broken into his chambers. She had shining golden eyes and called herself Rebecca Florence. Her mother, using unknown magic, had disappeared before his eyes. Miron realized with shock that Estate, the daughter of the second Empress Rebecca Florence, had entered the emperor's chambers and used magic. He was startled by this discovery. Emperor Alvin continued, saying that after the mysterious young woman appeared in his chambers, he learned the next day that Miron had gone to the empress's palace. This naturally aroused his suspicion. He stood up and questioned Miron about what he was hiding. The scene shifted to the next morning. Lyena excitedly told Ashton that there was beef stew for breakfast. Ashton was overjoyed. He praised Lyena for bringing the food. Lyena modestly waved her hand and began serving the beef stew. Ashton was even more satisfied when he saw the large chunks of meat. Lyena also brought scones for dessert. Ashton happily said they would be great with her sugar. Lyena thought happily that since Crown Princess Miron and Prince Noah had visited, they had never lacked food. They now received many ingredients, all formally delivered in Miron's name, and no longer had to beg for leftovers from the main palace. She was relieved that Princess Estate could finally have a full meal. However, Lyena also felt conflicted, resentful that the princesses were only showing kindness after neglecting them for so long. Ashton, while enjoying the stew, cheerfully invited Lyena to join him. Lyena smiled and agreed, choosing to put aside her resentment for the princess's sake. She silently worried about whether the rumors of the crown princess helping the empress's palace would spread. But so far, no one had asked. She recalled how Estate had always longed for her family's attention, but had always been disappointed. She also remembered the princess's indifference towards the princes during their visit. Lyena couldn't help but wonder what Estate had been through during this time. Suddenly, there was a rapid knock at the door. Lyena opened the door and found Sir Ashton. Ashton entered, sat down, and told them that the emperor had invited Princess Estate to the imperial palace. Hearing this, Estate froze, the cookie in her hand falling to the floor. She trembled all over, recalling how she had accidentally used magic and stumbled into the emperor's room, where he recognized her at once as Rebecca Florence's daughter. At this moment, she finally understood that the emperor was her father, and he wanted to see her now. She panicked, wondering if it was because she had snuck into his chambers. Lyena noticed her distress. Concerned, she asked if she was all right. Estate blurted out an excuse, saying she didn't want to go because people wouldn't like her leaving. In truth, she was only thinking that she didn't want to die. She quickly added another excuse, nervously saying that it might offend His Majesty. Seeing Estate so frightened, Ashton didn't know how to respond. Lyena began to worry, wondering if the princess's fear of the outside world had started after that brief trip to the garden. Ashton tried to comfort Estate, telling her not to worry. Estate felt relieved for a moment, thinking that perhaps she wouldn't have to go. But Ashton drew his sword and swore that if anyone dared to bully her, he would personally intervene. Estate became even more anxious. This was not the outcome she wanted. She could only desperately think of a better excuse to avoid meeting the emperor. She suddenly pretended to have a stomachache. Lyena immediately asked nervously if she was feeling unwell. Estate nervously said that her stomach seemed to hurt a little today, but in her heart, she apologized to Lyena. She thought that she had only recently reunited with Lyena and really didn't want to die young like in her previous life. She desperately feigned illness, trying everything she could to avoid seeing the emperor. Lyena, worried about Estate's stomachache, said she would go to the main palace to get some medicine. Ashton offered to go in Estate's place, agreeing that in her current state, she couldn't see the emperor. He said he would explain Estate's situation to the emperor, and it was clear they both believed her act. Estate sighed in relief, grateful her quick thinking had helped her avoid meeting the emperor. A short while later, Lyena returned, surprised to announce that the palace had sent a large amount of stomach medicine, enough to last a year. Estate started to get nervous, thinking that with all the stress, her stomach might actually start hurting now. A few days later, Ashton informed her that the emperor had invited her for tea. That day, Estate panicked again, thinking, not today either. Ashton gently asked how she wanted to respond to the emperor. This time, Estate explained that the emperor had been sending invitations for 5 days straight, and each time, she'd invented increasingly ridiculous excuses to avoid the meeting. She said she had a cold, a nosebleed, and even claimed to have had a dream warning her she'd break her leg if she left the house. Despite her repeated refusals, the emperor kept sending various medicines, painkillers, cold medicine, iron supplements, and so on. Estate had assumed he would eventually give up on seeing her. Just then, Ashton called her name. Estate flinched nervously, scrambling for another excuse. Unsure what to say next, panic rising, Estate apologized to Ashton, saying she really didn't want to go today. Ashton gently pressed her, asking if she would be willing to go tomorrow or the day after, then knelt before her, asking what he could do to make her willing to leave. Estate was suddenly overcome with emotion, recalling the injustices and punishments she had suffered in her past life. She realized that as a princess, she could refuse the emperor's requests without consequence, but Ashton might suffer because of her refusal. Worried, she asked him if her not going would cause him trouble. Ashton frankly admitted that it would, a great deal of trouble, touched by his honesty and kindness. Estate decided to be brave and see the Emperor for Ashton's sake. The thought of seeing the Emperor still made her tremble with fear. Ashton, noticing her anxiety, removed one of his gloves to comfort her, solemnly extending his hand and vowing on his knightly honor to protect her. Ashtarte noticed the calluses and scars on his hand. Realizing Ashton must be very strong, she hesitated, wondering if he was worried she might reject his gesture, but confessed she was still afraid to go out. However, she said that as long as he was with her, she thought she would be okay and gently place her hand in his. Deeply moved, Ashton recalled Lyena advising him to find someone precious to him, someone who could change his world. Ashton thought that perhaps he had finally found that person just in time. The scene shifted to the gazebo, where Emperor Alvin, seeing Ashtarte, remarked that she looked much better. The medicines seemed to have worked, and she appeared very healthy now. Ashtarte, however, was nervous and uneasy, unsure what to do. She recalled the past 10 years of her family's complete indifference. Even during celebrations, no one came to see her, and even the fireworks prepared for her were actually for her sister. Called the Black Star of the Empire, she felt forgotten. This sudden attention left her confused and disoriented. Noticing she hadn't eaten, the Emperor told her the food wasn't poisoned. Ashtarte startled, nervously asking if she could really eat. He responded somewhat coldly, asking if she thought it was all just for show. Looking at the abundant food, Ashtarte felt as though she'd entered another world. As the Emperor watched her, Ashtarte grew more anxious, fidgeting in her seat. She felt extremely uncomfortable sitting with Emperor Alvin. He looked at her and said she resembled her mother, Rebecca, and bitterly recounted how deeply he resented her. He said that when Rebecca conceived Ashtarte, she abandoned him, wanting only a royal child and not a relationship with him. These words shocked Ashtarte. She realized how deep the Emperor's hatred for her mother was, and perhaps this was why he later hated her too. Ashtarte cautiously tried to speak, to ask if his hatred was so profound that he had never once visited her. Just as she was about to say it wasn't her fault, a panicked-looking man, Dante, rushed in, informing the Emperor that the noble council was about to begin. Emperor Alvin seemed surprised, apparently having forgotten about the council. Dante added that it was quite unusual for the Emperor to be having tea at this time. This time, he was shocked to see Princess Ashtarte having afternoon tea with Emperor Alvin. Astonished, he couldn't help but wonder when they had become so close. Alvin rose to leave, politely telling Ashtarte that he enjoyed their time together, mentioning again how she reminded him of her mother, Rebecca. Ashtarte thanked him respectfully, but inwardly reflected on how painful it must have been for him to be abandoned by someone he loved deeply. She began to understand why he had never visited her, although she still felt hurt and disappointed. Before leaving, Alvin asked Ashtarte if she had ever resented him. Ashtarte silently admitted to herself that she had resented him until recently, but she told him that she no longer felt that way. Alvin asked curiously about this change. Just as he was about to leave, Dante urgently reminded him about the upcoming Noble Council meeting. Alvin bid farewell to Ashtarte and turned to leave. Ashtarte pondered quietly on why she no longer resented him, finally realizing it was because she had found her true family. Lyena gently draped a cloak around her and asked if they should return. Ashtarte agreed with a smile and returned with Lyena and Ashton. Ashton sensed something unusual in the air. Meanwhile, the Imperial Noble Council meeting was underway. Alvin announced that a special guest would be attending the upcoming religious ceremony, shocking the council members, who speculated that it must be Lord Isaiah. He was the only legitimate heir and most eligible successor to the Pope of the Holy Nation of Sensibilia. During the meeting, the elderly Marquis Carlos remarked that it was clear Lord Isaiah's visit was to witness Princess Amaryllis' divine qualities firsthand, adding that despite her young age, her beauty would surely leave a lasting impression. Then, Carlos raised the question of selecting a guide for Lord Isaiah. Traditionally, this role was filled by one of the two princes, Miron or Noah, without exception. However, this time, Carlos proposed a different suggestion. Princess Amaryllis should serve as the guide. Emperor Alvin frowned at the suggestion, but Carlos continued. Since Amaryllis is the morning star of Phylens, such an arrangement would also align with Sensibilia's wishes. The other council members expressed their agreement, supporting Carlos's proposal. Marquis Carlos secretly hoped that, if Princess Amaryllis became Lord Isaiah's guide, the empire could gain prestige, wealth, and political advantages, forging a closer relationship. However, Alvin questioned Carlos's claim that Amaryllis was the Empire's only star. Carlos was momentarily speechless. Alvin turned to the young nobleman, Count Arsene Moronica, emphasizing that the second Empress Regent's child still existed. Carlos gritted his teeth, cursing Arsene inwardly for mentioning the name no one had dared to utter for a decade. Silence fell over the meeting hall. Then, Alvin firmly declared that the other star of the prophecy, Estate Phylens, did indeed exist, reminding everyone of her rightful place. Carlos was stunned into silence by Emperor Alvin's sudden mention of Princess Estate's name. For years, everyone had assumed the Emperor himself wanted to erase her existence. Carlos couldn't understand why the man who had ignored her existence for so long was now bringing her up before the entire noble council. Carlos grew wary, reminding himself that Emperor Alvin was no ordinary ruler. He was the coldest yet most powerful emperor in history. When he ascended the throne, he ruthlessly purged the court of corrupt nobles, filling the palace with cries and pleas. Alvin had no tolerance for incompetence or disloyalty. Even high-ranking nobles were not spared if they failed to serve the empire. Emperor Alvin told Marquis Carlos that if Princess Amaryllis agreed, he could proceed with his arrangements for her to be Lord Isaiah's guide. Carlos thanked the emperor, drenched in cold sweat, still unable to discern Alvin's true intentions. The scene shifted to Noah and Miron having tea. Noah casually mentioned that their sister, Amaryllis, would be guiding the Sensibilia priest during the upcoming holy festival. Miron nodded in acknowledgement, but pointed out that Noah had already added 5 sugar cubes to his tea. Noah insisted it wasn't sweet enough and would add 6 next time. He then abruptly changed the subject, asking Miron if he had heard about Estate having afternoon tea with the emperor. Miron sighed, noting that Emperor Alvin's tardiness was unusual and unprecedented. His recent behavior had been quite strange, especially his sudden interest in Estate. Miron wondered if it was because she, like the late Empress Rebecca, possessed golden eyes, or if the emperor's state of mind had changed. He admitted that he couldn't fathom the emperor's thoughts, especially when some even questioned why he visited the former empress's palace. Noah then mentioned that the emperor had also summoned him. When asked what he said to the emperor, Noah replied that he said nothing. Miron asked if he should have said something, but Noah firmly stated there was no need. Miron thanked him in a low voice, while Noah frowned, a hint of worry in his expression. Noah told Miron that he was merely acting according to his own will, and there was no need for thanks. Miron then teasingly asked if Noah was also interested in Estate, to which Noah replied that he had his own methods. Miron sighed, remarking that it seemed everyone had suddenly taken an interest in her. Just then, the housekeeper, Medina Inkling, entered. Miron told her to raise her head. He confirmed that she was in charge of managing supplies, resources, and the palace budget. Medina nervously answered. Miron produced a suspicious budget report from the Empress's palace and questioned Medina about it. He asked her to confirm if the contents of the report were true. Medina became visibly anxious, her mind flashing back to her dealings with the high priest. The high priest had assured her that he would take care of the evidence in the budget report. Miron noticed her hesitation and questioned why she didn't answer, implying that her silence was an admission of guilt. Medina trembled with fear, unable to respond. She recalled her past conversation with the high priest, when she had worried that the crown prince would uncover the truth hidden within the ledger. The high priest had comforted her, promising to handle the matter personally and telling her to return to the palace. Although she had believed the high priest's words, Medina was now consumed by anxiety and unease, unsure if she was truly protected. Back in the present, standing before Crown Prince Miron, Medina tried to compose herself, nervously insisting that she had served the palace and the Firenze Empire faithfully all her life. Miron, suspecting her dishonesty, continued to press her about the discrepancies in the Empress's palace budget report, despite her increasing panic. Medina denied any wrongdoing, swearing that the ledger was absolutely true and clean. But inside, she was terrified, knowing that if her lies were exposed, she would not only be exiled, but possibly imprisoned for life. Despite this, she still clung to the hope that the high priest had erased the evidence and that she would be protected. After carefully observing her words and actions, Miron finally said that it seemed to be the case. Medina gasped in shock, unsure if she was truly safe or still under suspicion. Crown Prince Miron, in a calm and thoughtful tone, told Medina that her work was impeccable and he had only wanted to test her as a way of commending her loyalty. Medina visibly relaxed, humbly replying that it was enough to hear him say so. However, Miron's tone suddenly turned stern, warning her that any disrespect towards the royal family was treason, punishable by hanging at the very least. A chill ran down Medina's spine, leaving her both confused and terrified, unsure of what he was implying. Miron then dismissed her. Just as she turned to leave, Noah suddenly slammed his teacup onto the floor. The teacup shattered, and his hand began to bleed. Medina turned back in alarm, Noah still staring coldly at her, sarcastically blaming the fragile teacups. The atmosphere in the room became incredibly tense. Medina's heart pounded in her chest, sensing that Noah's words and gaze were far from unintentional. Meanwhile, Miron inquired concernedly about his brother's condition, but Noah curtly replied that he was fine, though the atmosphere clearly suggested otherwise. Medina was extremely uneasy, realizing that Noah had deliberately broken the teacup to make himself bleed. She was certain it was a silent threat. Both Prince Noah and Crown Prince Miron were warning her to stay in line or face severe consequences. She feared that if she made even the slightest mistake, she would be the next to suffer. Miron sighed, feeling helpless, admitting that Medina was right. There was indeed nothing wrong with the ledger. In fact, the ledger was too perfect, which made him suspect it had been deliberately altered to conceal the truth. The scene shifted to the Knights' headquarters at night. Several Knights pleaded with Captain Ashton not to leave. They were both shocked and emotional, unable to believe he was truly resigning. Someone tearfully joked that perhaps he was going to marry the beautiful woman he had always admired. Ashton calmly told everyone that Vice Captain Alec would take over, assuring them that the Knights wouldn't crumble without him. He encouraged them to be strong and continue their hard work, and appointed Lucas as the next vice captain. Much to Lucas's surprise, when asked what he would do after leaving, Ashton solemnly stated that there was a noble person he was meant to protect, without revealing his true mission. Ashton then met with Crown Prince Miron and submitted his resignation from the Imperial Knights. Miron asked Ashton in surprise why he would resign from such a glorious position. Ashton replied that he had things he wanted to do, things he wanted to accomplish before it was too late. He wished to become the sword that protected his state. Miron froze, realizing Ashton was willing to give up everything for her. He reminded Ashton that a state couldn't form her own knight order without the Emperor's permission. And if Ashton left, he would lose his title, his power, and all the privileges he currently held. However, Ashton stated that he was prepared to discard meaningless honors for the person who mattered more than anything else. Miron understood Ashton's resolve, respected his choice, and accepted the resignation. Seeing Ashton packing his belongings, Miron asked if he intended to leave the palace immediately. Ashton replied that he did, as he had already submitted his resignation. Chuckling softly, Miron pulled out several documents from a drawer and handed them to him, explaining that the transfer procedures to the Empress's palace would take some time. In the meantime, he tasked Ashton with finding a few specific individuals. A young woman from an impoverished noble family, a pair of twins with scars on their faces, and someone whose family name had vanished. Ashton was initially puzzled. Miron explained that these individuals were potential candidates to become estate's maids. Ashton was surprised, as such positions were usually held by young women from prominent noble families, not those with scars or fallen fortunes. He realized that because the Empire feared estate, few were truly willing to serve her sincerely, and these individuals might be the only options. Miron instructed Ashton to let the candidates decide for themselves. If they agreed, he was to bring them to the Empress's palace. Ashton mused that Miron was gradually starting to help estate. Everyone who met her changed, including himself. He bowed respectfully and accepted the order. Half a month later, estate happily swept the hallway with a broom. After finishing, she admired her work with excitement. Suddenly, Lyena appeared behind her, catching her in the act. Lyena playfully scolded her for cleaning behind her back again. Estate nervously explained that she just wanted to help because Lyena seemed tired lately. Lyena smiled and handed her a glass of sweetened milk, reminding her that if she kept the secret, she could have more. Ashtarte recalled that since having tea with the emperor, the herbs and invitations from the palace had stopped coming. Everything had become peaceful. She took a sip of the sweetened milk and cried out happily, savoring the wonderful taste. The next day, Ashtarte was surprised to see Ashton arrive with a group of people. Shocked, she asked him why he wasn't alone. Ashton explained that these were the newly assigned maids to the Empress's palace. The group bowed respectfully, greeting her and expressing their honor to serve Princess Ashtarte. Ashtarte was so moved she couldn't speak. However, Lyena's face was filled with suspicion and a hint of jealousy. She questioned whether these women were truly the princess's maids and demanded to know who had authorized their unannounced arrival. Ashton calmly replied that the crown prince had authorized it. Lyena scoffed, thinking he was up to something, but Ashton clarified that it wasn't what she thought. Lyena remained dissatisfied, insisting that the crown prince's treatment of the princess was overstepping. Meanwhile, Ashtarte smiled and bowed gently, warmly welcoming the new maids. She sweetly introduced herself. Lyena was taken aback by Ashtarte's ready acceptance of them. Ashton assured her that these women had applied voluntarily, which surprised Lyena even more. He asked Lyena if she would now accept these new maids. Although reluctant, she sighed and admitted she could no longer care for the princess alone. Then she noticed Ashton's different attire with surprise. Ashton knelt on one knee before Ashtarte and formally declared himself her personal guard. Both Ashtarte and Lyena were stunned. Later, as they sat together, Lyena asked what would become of the Night Order. Ashton calmly replied that they would manage without him. He reassured Ashtarte that this was entirely his own decision and that she shouldn't feel burdened. However, Ashtarte worried inwardly, wondering if he could truly give up everything for her, if he would regret it or even resent her. But Ashton gently told her that becoming her guard was the best decision he'd ever made, that he wouldn't regret it, and promised to be her sword and shield. He would protect her always. Becoming her protector was his life's most unwavering choice.